Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving up your time to be with us.
Pleasure.
Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, a bit about your background?
My name is Steve Barr, as you might be able to tell from how I talk. I'm not from around these parts. I went to school in Los Angeles, got a degree in acting, and very quickly discovered I'm an average white dude, and there's lots of me in LA. And so I got a job doing sort of the business side of the business for Universal Studios for about 10 years. Then I sold a screenplay to Disney. I became a creative. I became a development executive, which is a person, a big part of my job was taking and receiving pitches. And then I came to New Zealand in 2010 so my wife could go to veterinary school. We were supposed to go back in 2015 after she graduated because I could get back into the studios and she could sell horse tranquilizers to Lindsay Lohan. But Lindsay's career is not doing great, and New Zealand is awesome, so we've been sticking around. And 6 months ago I took a job. I'm now the commissioner of drama and scripted comedy at TVNZ. So I have pitched and caught probably 3,000 times. I'm a big fan of pitching for there's lots of different kinds of pitches and lots of different value you can get depending on what kind of pitch it is. And really happy to be here and talk about stuff.
Great. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
Hey mate, how's it going?
Not too bad. What a fine description. There's some good pitching right there of yourself. You know who you are. For me, my name's Slavko. I went to university and studied for 5 years. I couldn't get into film school back then because to get into film school you had to go to fine arts school, and to be able to do that you had to paint. But I can't hold a crayon properly or draw a stick figure, so that was never going to happen. So I studied drama and other things. Then went off and ruined my life for many, many years, and only in 2003 did I decide I wanted to make films. And so began the process of realising you had to pitch and constantly pitch and pitch and pitch. And so I hope today to be able to share all of my screw-ups on the trajectory of pitching, with a couple of little victories along the way so you don't have to go through what I went through. And please shout out with questions mid-story, and because there'll be so many people here, I think, who are at different stages of careers and where you've pitched and want to pitch and get to. And
so on that note, what I usually like to do is just get a bit of a feel for who's here in the room. So who here is a filmmaker? Great. Who here's made a documentary before? Great. Okay. Well, I think it's a good cross-section of people. So
great.
I thought we might start by watching a case study of a pitch. How does that sound?
Sweet.
So this is, we're going to watch Jazz Thornton's pitch from 2017 at the Dock Edge Pitch. This is her pitch for what became Jessica's Tree, which is like an online web series that came out last year. I think we might just watch it, hey?
And great.
Yeah,
see what happens.
Take it.
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to pitch. Like she said, I am still in film school, term 2, and I am also carrying on the morbid subject. This one is called Silent Killer, which is based around the topic of suicide. What I'm pitching is a seven-episode web series, which is obviously about the topic of suicide. And I know that this is a hard subject and story to tell, but it's one that people my age want to talk about. You may have seen 13 Reasons Why, and all the talk about that is something that teenagers, that everyone knows someone who's suffered with this and is struggling with this. The reason that I know that this is something people want to talk about is recently I directed a video called Dear Suicidal Me. And the video, if you can bring up the second slide, within 48 hours was picked up by 7 News Australia, New Zealand Herald, Daily Telegraph and Daily Mail UK, who all did big spreads on it. It is now sitting at 39 million views and has been shared across the world as well. So this is something people want to talk about. So if we can play the video. This video is just an interview with the parents about the main character that is going to be in Silent Killer. It's not necessarily a trailer. It's just an interview I did with them last year to give you a bit of insight.
Jess was doing a early childhood education course. She'd completed level 3. She had plans to have a family.
7. She wanted seven children.
We said one at a time. The police got search and rescue involved, which was the first time that had happened. We were still positive, and the police will find her. As they do, she'll be annoyed that she's been found. They'll bring her back. She'll be annoyed at us, and we'll do what we normally do. The search and rescue gentleman, he came in, and he said, "We think we've found her." And I thought, "Oh, that's great. Where is she?" Well, she's she didn't make it. She's passed away. She's dead.
If I don't hear it, then it won't be real.
I asked the detective sergeant if we could see Jess, and so we all walked down. I just touched her. She was cold.
Jess and James Lambert were 2 of over 400 parents last year that lost their teenagers to suicide. New Zealand has the highest teenage suicide statistic in the world per capita. Now, just to extend a little bit on that story, Jess, when she was a young girl, had a pretty normal life, but when she was 7 years old, her school report started to change. She was playing up in school, she was back chatting to her teachers, and it was later discovered that throughout those 7 years of her life, she had been horrifically abused. She was raped, she was chained to bed, she was locked in closets, she was drowned to the point where she couldn't breathe, had to come back up. Now, the way that we're going to tell this is, thankfully, Jess was a writer. She's got diaries full of every event that happened and everything that was going through her mind. So her best friend is going to be reading out that as we go into reenactments, as well as interviews with her parents, teachers, and peers. The purpose of this is that some of you from New Zealand may have heard recently a story about a young girl who was on the South Motorway Bridge, and she was trying to take her life. And so Stuff in New Zealand Herald, they covered this. The comments, if you go to the first slide, was something like this. Someone go drag that mole back from the edge so traffic can get going. If she was serious, she would have done it by now. She just wants attention. Hopefully 50,000 volts worth is being arranged. The stigma around suicide and mental health is that you're attention seeking. I know that this is a hard story, but the reality is that our young people, they don't want to speak out because all that people see is statistics and numbers, not the stories behind it. The purpose of this is to change this stigma, to change that these people are not attention seeking, but there is reason and purpose to that, so that going forward our young people feel like they can ask for help and they can speak out without this being cast upon them. And the reason that I believe that I'm the best person to tell the story is that my story is actually very similar to Jess's as well, so I know what it's like. Obviously I am a young director, I know what it's like to grow up in this day and age with the abuse, the suicidal attempts and tendencies as well. So I can not only relate in the way of how to tell the story, but also within the mindset of what it's like to be in that space as well. I feel like we can really do it justice, and people want to see change. People are willing to see change, clearly by the first video that went viral that we did. So my question is, will you help me make that change?
It's pretty powerful stuff.
Damn good pitch.
What do you think about that pitch is like particularly strong?
I think there's always a combination when you're pitching of you are pitching the project and also you're pitching yourself as a project maker. And we were having a chat before of almost every job I've ever gotten has come from a failed pitch of I've been trying to get one thing set up and for whatever reason that thing was not appropriate to whoever I was talking to, but then they hired me to do something else. So Jazz, is it? Jazz was really good at not only conveying that her authority over this process and this project, she understands it, she has her personal reason to do it, she has access to people who have very emotional stories, and also she seems like the kind of person that you could spend several years with trying to get a project up and running. And that's more important than you might think, you know? As we pitch, I think a lot of us get into being behind the camera because we're not comfortable being in front of the camera. And yet we still have points of view we want to get across, and like, this is the way we're going to do it, but I also get to separate myself from I just hit my microphone, sorry. But when you're pitching, don't try to fake that you're someone that you're not, but walk in that room being the confident, friendly, communicative, persuasive person version of yourself. Because a lot of times that's the thing that's actually going to get you over the edge is, the project's pretty good, I think, but I really trust this person can make it good. And that's hopefully one of the things you're trying to get at. Jazz was really good at that. I've got like 2 other things I can talk about, but...
Oh no, far away. I mean, I'll just jump in there and say immediately from the first beat where she opened her mouth, you're engaged because she's speaking from the marrow in her bones. This thing in her needs to get out. And she's there and she's talking to you so directly and cleanly. I'm captivated from the very first sentence. I want to feel what she's saying, and she's transmitting it to you, you know. Totally drawn in. For me, whatever she was going to say was going to pop. And the fact that she actually was able to articulate so clearly and then visually twice use visual cues so well and then keep backing it up. This is personal to me because, you know, I'm the right person for this because, and you believed it and she knew it and transmitted it. Clear, simple stuff.
And what about the choice of that excerpt, that interview? Like, do you think that was...
I think it was... the further I've been doing this for 25 years now, and it used to be things were much drier and required a whole lot more intellect and experience from the people who were buying. And now there's so much stuff being thrown at the buyers that they're not as good at it as they used to be, and also they're just swamped. And so we're seeing a lot more of these sort of visual aids and practical things. Like even if she had done that interview, as powerful as that interview was, but if it was just a flat thing and we just watched them both in a 2-shot the whole time, it wouldn't have been quite as good. Clearly that's not the final product of the documentary she would make, but it still shows that this person has a documentarian's taste.
Yep.
You know, and having inserts and having close-ups and the fact that they were sitting close together and they were touching each other, and that gives you a sense of their relation. All of that stuff is really good at passing on, and when they cut, you know, the man tearing up, and then that easy, quick cut instead of just pausing and looking at him crying for a while and feeling awkward about it, cutting quickly to the woman, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And she's instantly shown that she's got trust and rapport in there. Because you want that evidence, right? As a commissioner, you'd be like, but who are you to go in there and do this? Why you? Because I can go in there and get that. I'm trusted to get that. That information's in there. Yeah,
so you don't necessarily like need a trailer or like a succinct...
You don't necessarily know. It makes things easier if you do. And again, you're going to be judged on the content of the trailer and also the style of the trailer. And I think that was a pretty good style, even though it was done cheaply and easily.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have bells and whistles, it doesn't need them.
Yeah.
It still conveys a sense of taste and a sense of competence to it. And she got through a lot of just the practicalities of her pitch. You know it's a web series, you know it's this many episodes, you know who the audience is for and why they will care. You know, you get a sense of her taste, you get a sense of why now. There's all these things that she's just sort of rattling through that a lot of the buyers have sort of a mental checklist. And if you can hit all those things up front, then they don't have to ask you later on. You might, as you're designing a pitch, you might leave a couple of those things unchecked on purpose to force the question, because then you can, you know, get into that. You can start to game the situation a little bit. But and we don't have time to get into it, but I made a list of the things that I'm looking for when I hear a pitch and I'm looking to convey when I do a pitch. So come find me in the middle and just like take a photo of my little list if you want. Because there's a lot of information in a proper pitch. Just like a proper documentary or proper film, is crammed full of incident and information and stuff, and yet on the surface feels like it's just this easy, fun, entertaining thing. And if you can do that in a pitch, that's a really good sign that you can do that in whatever your actual thing is that you're pitching.
But it takes a lot of practice, right?
It takes a lot of practice, yes.
So...
Is it about really know? You feel as though you do that when you know the material, and like when you've actually really hashed it out. And, Yeah, just knowing your material, isn't it? You know, it's like you sort of have to go expand the idea and then draw it back into its sort of concept, isn't it? In the simplest
Yeah, exactly
form or
right.
something, don't you?
One of the things that makes me think, I'm sorry, Slavko, I'm sort of jumping all over this.
No, I'll be support act. Didn't realise it'd be this easy.
I think of it like you're a dock worker, right? Not dock working the docks. You're a DOC, Department of, you're the. So you need to know the entire forest, and then you need to have marked out that really great thing that goes from this waterfall to that glowworm cave to that, and it's got clear signs of where the turns are. So you know all the most beautiful places, but if you got lost in that forest, you can easily find your way back, because you're going to get lost in the forest during a pitch sometime. And if you only know the path, you're kind of screwed, because then all of you are lost and you have to end up eating each other.
The physical rehearsal of a pitch. What do you do? What's your routine? Do you have a way of going through and just going through, walking and talking? Because that's kind of important. Your presentation physically is as important as the stuff you're going to talk about.
Yeah, no, that's right. And well, this will bring us to the fact that there are so many different types of pitches. And the one where you'll have to physically prepare, I think, early on, personally for me, I'll be mentally prepared. I'll have done so much research on my project. I'll never get to a pitch in a room in front of someone like Steve. I'm never going to get there until I know everything he comes back at me with, every question. I'm prepared. I've researched that far. I know what the project is. I'm comfortable with it. I don't train myself too much for that, and that's just my style. Once I get in a room with someone and I'm confident and I'm loving the project, critical. Don't ever do something you don't love. Sometimes easier said than done, but if you can find the love in it and you're passionate about it and you're crazy about it, you kind of can't fail with the pitch. Even if you think, oh, I'm not a good speaker, I'm not funny and stuff, whatever. No, you got that love for that project and you know it and it's in there. You get yourself in that room, it'll come out, right? And so for me, when I go in there, I'm not preparing word by word. Oh, sentence 2, I've forgotten it, I've fluffed it up. No way. I know my stuff. I'll go in there and I'll have a conversation. And usually it'll be like a hook thing. It'll be like, do you know how many things are, whatever the thing is? No, what's going on? And you're involved, right? We're going to have a gossip. And that's how I treat things. You're not going to believe this. And then I have a gossip thing, and they're like, no. I'm like, it's true, I'll tell you. And I'll give you some stats. Because I was thinking about this the other day when I started on this 2 years ago. I was just, wow. And away we go, and it's a conversation. And I'm not pitching at you. I'll have a conversation. It's all in there. Make no mistake, but you're involved. I'll involve you in it. Other times, for a sales pitch,
Many people, that's another different sort of
Performance pitch.
yeah, or a performance pitch, like what we just saw, right? And that's like, I think of those as competition pitches too, you know. Yeah, those are prepared. You've got X minutes, and you've got to get up there. And I would say, I don't know if we're showing this other clip.
We will.
Oh, yeah. And we were having a bit of a debate about this. Which clips should we show of these 3 good pitches from Dock Edge? And one of them succeeded in the sense that, you know, it's got the nod from TVNZ, I believe, to go through to a funding round. But actually, I look at that and think there's so much you can learn from that. A pitch for me, as opposed to sending a document or a proposal, which is sometimes, this might be blasphemy at this pitching event, but sometimes the best thing you can do is send a written document. If it's so well written that it would be a joy to read, like it just sizzles on through, like you're flipping the page, oh wow, and you can see it. That might be the best thing. But I think, and you'll see this, if you're going to pitch, it's because you're there, right? You've turned up, you're the personality, the person who's going to make it. All of you want to see me, or Steve, or someone else. Why you? Here I am. I'm on full display. I'm going to be vulnerable. It might not be pretty, but here I am, and I'm going to tell you a story about me and what I can do. And I'm going to bring the magic, and it might not be perfect, but here I am. And so what you'll see in that clip is someone coming up and reading the proposal, literally word for word on the paper. I don't think of that as a pitch.
Should we watch it?
I think if you're there to pitch,
Be there.
it's you. There you are. And to answer your question, study that. Practice like hell. Practice in front of your grandma. Practice in front of your friends. So you don't have to have a bit of paper. And then you're a real storyteller, and you'll be present because you don't have anything to lean on. You'll have to go. And then I said, or like Jazz was doing, I mean, she's present, right? She's feeling it. That wouldn't have been what she scripted, I believe. She would have just gone, I know what to do, and here it is, and it pops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we watch
My
Showtime?
answer, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
And I
great.
don't mean to be critical. They did very well. They succeeded this pitch.
But think how much more they could have succeeded if they pitched well.
yeah.
So we can pause this if you guys want to pause it and jump in and comment at any time. Just
Yes, we.
sure, yeah.
Okay, great.
And this will also have, we might not get through it all, but this will also have the feedback panel discussion that they have after the pitch.
Oh, right.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
My name is Slavko Martinov. Standing beside me is Jude, who is a lifelong resident of South Auckland. We are the directors of the feature-length documentary O-Town. We have worked together on documentary projects for the last 10 years. O-Town is the story of O-Town. It's told through the life-changing elements of music. We are telling O-Town with a three-act chronological structure, which we believe is very important to this pitch. Regional
Act 1, early 70s, Pacifica Māori began settling Otara, South Auckland. Polynesians, people born of music, form the largest community of in the world. Pacifica hymns Māori guitar parties kapahaka the new sounds of a suburban change. Eunice also has teething problems. Otara becomes the mainstream media poster child for Polynesian gangs, gang fights and killings. But in the sounds of Eunice, someone hears a common ground. 1988, as a response to the violence, community advocate Sione Pasine opens Otara Music and Arts Centre, aka OMEC, History, New Zealand's first council-funded recording studio. Act 2, 1988, Minister from OMEC and opposing group decapitate Tongan David Foucault with a machete. OMEC is needed, the dream, Polynesian people born of music, trading together. Thousands use the OMEC facility. Norm Mann, OMEC sound engineer, we ground up New Zealand music like motherfucking shoe polish. And in fact, the world. OMEC alumni Paulie Whimana's hit song How Bizarre goes to #1 in 11 different countries. Otara, OMEC, the genesis of a musical revolution that empowers Polynesians here, around the world. Hip-hop takes hold in the hood, but the confrontational brand of is not embraced by mainstream, but does millions upon millions of views online. Act 3, now, still heard in the hood. Hip-hop is still king, gang shootings are live, but so is music. Our present tense characters, Potter House and Otara Youth Evangelical Church, rap their message on the streets, stay away from drugs, thugs, gangs and guns, all other ungodly things. Luke, the window-washing rapper, Jazz, the indie pop aspirant are trying to live their dream. OMEC is still fighting the fight. Every Saturday at the local market has more Polynesian buskers than any other place on the planet, but no music movers and shakers come looking, none. And prodigious talent continues to fall through the gaps like flood water through a drain pipe. This is our story. In closing, I met a young busker. His rap song, Otara Dreaming, ended up eating food. A few lines that sum up the now in a nutshell. Otara Dreaming. We fly to our homelands, we lay in lava. People fly to our homelands, we lay in lava, drink kava, line our beaches to get their part-time tans. But why he really comes to Otara, this Pacifica island, unless he's driving a car with flashing sirens. Otara, chapter now, every day a struggle. Some selling, some schooling, some praying upon. Some scheming, some dreaming, some too far motherfucking gone. We know why he can drive us out of town, it's happening again now, but he cannot steal our brown, our sound, that flows with it.
I mean, if I was a commissioner, I'd be happy to sit there quietly and read that, and I would get everything you wanted to say, and it would read really well.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be present to just read like that, I think that's a loss.
Yeah.
You know, he should have am I missing something maybe?
No, I'd just like to. Sorry. This is not the official opinion of the Film Commission. I just always have to reference that.
Disclaimer taken.
I'd just like to point out that that's like a spoken word poem.
Yeah.
So that's actually the strength of the pitch, because if you have come across that poetry, then that's, for me, that's how
a
it's
good
flowing.
point.
However, it's so we set that up as that's a street poet from O-Town. How much better would it be if he actually got that street poet either there at the pitch or got him on camera?
I totally
Because he's not
agree.
very good at it.
I totally
He's
agree.
probably got other skills, but he's not really selling the value of
Gosh,
the
if
content.
they've got the person.
Yeah,
Yeah, can you
that would
imagine?
be
Nick,
the
it
nth
would have
degree.
been-
But even so, even the reading though, if you just closed your eyes and heard him read, that is spoken word to me. The rhythm of it, the way he reads, the way his delivery, that sort of that intonation of it too, that it's kind of very consistent. And I think that can't be underestimated, because he's painting beautiful pictures and there's a lot of imagery in the wording and things like that. I just wanted to put that out there. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's-
no, fair enough too, and good point. It's just that when I first saw that, I didn't
Yeah, it could be. There could be
Quite.
more.
get that, and I
Yeah.
felt stumped.
Wondering about your perspective on producers or directors pitching. So, for example, these are directors who are kind of coming in with the story, I guess, artistic eye, whereas a producer is maybe coming in with a more of a project
Well,
vision.
this guy is actually the producer.
Oh, okay, right, sorry. But so, I mean, what is your view on that, I suppose?
Well, we were just having a chat about this. I produce and direct and write my own films, but I work with other people, and sometimes we were just talking about how good it is if I can have one of my producers with me when we go to pitch. It's a powerful thing. Like, I'll take the lead and talk about the pitch, but they'll jump in once in a while and take the piss out of me, or have my back if I get asked a question, and there will always be questions coming at you. And sometimes your partner is the best person to jump in and take over, because it gives balance. I get a bit manic sometimes and talk too much, and I get a bit too excited and get carried away, and that calm person just steps in and be like, what Slavko means to say. And everyone has that reaction, and they're also secretly thinking, oh, thank God, shut him up. And that relief comes in. I'll be like, yeah, all right, yeah, all right. And I carry on and get back on with my spiel. And it's that balance of producer, director, or two producers and director, cinematographer together.
But are there certain context or moments where it's better to pitch by yourself?
There can be, yeah. Typically, and there's a little bit of break between factual stuff and fiction stuff. Typically, a producer pitches the project, a writer pitches the narrative, and the director pitches the vision, or the expression of the narrative. But a lot of times in documentary, writer and director certainly are the same person, and quite often it's all three. But there's also one of the things that that happens so much, and I'm sure you guys have experienced in your real life, is in this kind of high stakes storytelling where art and commerce are constantly hitting each other. Almost every level needs nerds and popular people. All the time, and everyone in here knows which one you are, right? And some of us are nerds who pretend to be popular, some are popular people who pretend to be nerds, there's all this sort of stuff. But if you are one and you don't really want to learn, you're gonna have to learn a little bit of the other, but if you can team up with someone who's the other, then that makes so much stuff easier, because the stuff that's easy and natural to you is tough for them, and vice versa. And this is a team sport. This really is a team sport. And if you can't, and you will find that your life gets so much easier. You find someone who shares your taste. They have to share your taste, but they have a different personality and a different set of skills, mindset. I don't know if that quite answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's useful.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Should we watch the feedback for this?
Yes, great.
The New Zealand story. We want to show that there is a producing company. This teaser was made with the development of funding from the New Zealand Film Commission. Our plan is to put in full production financing with the Film Commission and enter on air so as many New Zealanders can see O-Town as possible. But before that, we really want to see what the market thinks. We believe the story also has international themes and will engage a larger audience. We've had interest from an Australian and New Zealand distribution company, and we do realise that because it's a music documentary, music rights are expensive, and we've taken that into consideration for our budget. We see movies like Rich Hill as a great visual reference to the cinematography and how to intimately portray our lead characters.
He just talked about his budget and his comps. These are more things that I'm taking off my mental list. He talked about what things are going to cost, the fact that this is going to cost a little bit more for certain reasons. That actually shows that he's got some authority. He knows what he's talking about as a producer. And also talked about his comps or his comparables. What are other things in the marketplace that are similar to this? When you're trying to find your comps, never talk about something that wasn't successful. Always talk about the successful versions of what it is that you're trying to do. Sorry.
Yeah, great.
The right thing as a strong guide to how we use the textual sounds of the environment to help the audience feel and understand the tension of the community. We proudly believe that this is a New Zealand film and a New Zealand story. We want to show that there is beauty in the struggle, that music can give a voice to a community that has suffered and proved sometimes music, sometimes is the only thing that makes sense.
That's called the big why. What is it you're actually trying to talk about? What do you want to say? And if you can articulate your big why, that gets you really far in letting people fill in the gaps in your pitch. Because your pitch is always going to have gaps unless it's 2 hours long. So if you talk about this is the point I'm trying to make, clearly and articulately, which we call the big why, that also helps fill in all those gaps and lets people follow along better.
One of my questions was, so it's a music doco, and I just wondered about the way you're intending to tell the story. Do you have a sense there'll be any central protagonist to it, or will it be collated from the sort of history and the music and people of the community talking about it?
Starting with I guess the settlement of Otara that's kind of present tense iteration, the sounds of newness being churches, kapahaka, garage parties. That's kind of the music that founded the suburb that ultimately became the birthplace of television pop New Zealand.
Do you notice you only sort of halfway answered that question? That's all I had to say on that. Yeah. And start paying attention. There's a pattern here. And this is one of the ones I'm glad, Slavko, you brought it up to talk about, is they're going to start getting some very specific questions, and they give unspecific answers to them. So they're not quite listening. One of the things to remember in a pitch is you're there to entertain, but you're also there to sell. And like sales 101 is not about you, it's about the person you're selling to. What is their pain point? Yep. What is the thing in their life that they wish was better? And how are you solving that for them? Because if you're ever in a pitch and the entirety of the pitch, the subtext is, it's all right, I got this. You don't have to worry about this anymore. And you can convey that, oh man, the money was just fall. Come on, you know? But you have to know what their pain, but the thing is they're trying to solve. You have to figure out what that is in the first place. And some of that is research before you show up. And if you can come in there and say, I understand your problems and I can solve them for you with this piece of material, and you can convince them of that, you got a deal. That's it.
On that, so when we first started thinking about the project, we were looking at OMAC and sort of celebrating the success of OMAC. But then after a while, we realised that was sort of holding us to streamline the story. So then we started talking about Otara as the story itself and how the music had changed all the way through, but the situation for Otara hasn't changed at all as far as the youth and things like that. But music from interfaith in the 70s right the way through to now, which is sort of, it went through quite a sort of gangster rap thing, as you can see through there, but now there's sort of a huge broad section of that girl Jazz with blue hair. She's almost folk. Luke at the lights. He's, he's but it's purely hip hop.
So Amy, who's the redheaded lady, asked the question of how are you going to tell this story, and they are sort of wondering. That's such an obvious question that you can assume you're going to be asked, and they clearly haven't. They might, between the two of them, really, really know how they want to tell a story. They are not conveying it very well at all. They seem very sort of, it'll be this, it'll be that.
Well, she specifically asked who's the protagonist.
Yeah.
Right?
And they can't, it's not,
Yeah,
they're
it's
not talking
simple.
about it. Yeah. And it's one of the interesting, like I'm a fiction guy, but one of the interesting things about documentary is there's certain kinds of documentaries that you just dive in and see what you get, and then you figure out your narrative afterwards. And that's cool, and that's kind of part of the fun of it. But if that was the answer to that question, they should have just given that as the answer.
Yeah.
So I guess that probably from looking, I have similar thoughts about really who is the talent. And I guess from a music perspective, are you following artists, or are they more the talent that is sort of from that community now, and they're not particularly artists per se, but you've got a music soundtrack running through it, but they're real people. So there's really, I'm not entirely clear which way you're going to go with it, but I think both have, pros and cons.
Yeah, look, the musical talent that's drawn from Aotearoa is the wellspring. So 88, when OMAC opens, essentially,
He's not quite answering. Go ahead and just let it play, because we're going to run out of time as we go. So I'm just going to top over the top of this. Again, she's asking about who is a human being that we are going to care about, that we can follow the story of the town through this human being. And they want to tell the story of a town. It's really hard to tell the story of some buildings and streets. So who are the human beings, and in documentaries you call it talent, that we are going to follow, because we are human beings, we are all empathetic. As soon as you show a person on screen, we're going to want to feel their emotions. And that's a great thing to walk us through. So like you could do, I don't know their story, they could have grabbed some of these modern day really good street poets and then teach them the history of their town. And through them, we get to learn the history of the town. Awesome, great, that's a connection, that's an emotional, empathetic thing. Rad, you could say that in 12 seconds. And I feel like I'm shitting on them, but they're not.
It's identify who those people are, because that's actually the head of New Zealand On Air in terms of program, funding, and then that's the head of
the Film Commission,
Development and Production.
Yep.
So they're two very influential people in the local market.
Yeah.
That's right.
And just to reiterate, right, that this succeeded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean? This got picked up. TVN, my colleague Vicky has picked it up and has gone to New Zealand Air to fund this. So this got through on the power of the underlying premise. And so that might be a comfort level. If you've got a premise that is undeniable, you can fuck up the pitch. But if you've got, let's say there were 3 different people trying to do something about O-Town, and this was one of them, somebody else probably would have gotten that thing. O-Town is an undeniable arena in which to tell a story, and I think Vic Usra and our colleagues at TVNZ are really good at this kind of story.
Well, so Vicky's right there. You can see she's very engaged.
Yeah, and I think later on she says, "Come talk to me."
Yeah.
Because I think she could see that with some massage. So one of the things that they are doing really well is you can feel how passionate they are. They absolutely love this thing, and I think at least one of them grew up there. And that comes across really well, which is great. And that's what's your personal connection, what's your access? Particularly if you're doing a documentary, if you don't have access to the thing you want to tell a story about, why are you the one pitching it? And they definitely have access. And so Vicky could see that there was a thing here that she could help massage up into something.
Timing too, right? If Vicky had her finger on the pulse of something that she was looking for at this particular point in time, and you happen to have that thing she's been looking for, and you walk in, don't do a particularly good pitch, but you got enough juice there, enough going on that she could take it in because she wants it and massage and move. That's good timing. And here's the thing about pitching, I don't know if this helps or hinders, but sometimes it's going to be the right time with not the perfect pitch, but you should always be prepared. But the amount of times you'll do the most killer, beautiful pitch in the world, and you did, and it happened, you nailed it, no, and it's not going to happen,
So I think we've just completely contradicted. Yeah. Don't bother learning how to pitch. Doesn't matter.
No, I mean you've always got to do a great job and be as prepared as you can. Turn it on. You've always got to turn it on. No, there's the point.
Yeah.
Because often it happens that there are 3 people at least lining up to cover some new topic or something that's hot, right? And you're going to end up in the same place talking to the same people. The point is, you've got to be at the top of your game and really turn it on.
I like to, well, one of the things that stopped me from going insane when I'm on the creative side of the table is let's say there are 400 things that all have to line up for any project to get made. No matter how good I am at my various jobs, I can control maybe 50 of those 400 things, no matter what. There's so much stuff that's way out of my control that I cannot control, and if I try to, I'll drive myself insane. But those 50 things I can control, I'm going to be the best damn person I can at those 50 things I can't control. And pitching is one of those things, like pitching technique and how you convey yourself in a room or in a, this is a performance pitch, and we'll talk about some of the differences later. You know how you set those up.
I thought it might just be interesting if we hear the questions from the international panelists.
Yeah, hit it.
Because they have quite a different take on it and some different questions. So.
You know, there are music documentaries out there that really don't focus on the musicians as much as they focus on a place, or they focus on a recording studio, or that becomes the kind of continuous thread through the film. And I think, you know, I have that question in my mind about, you know, it seems like you're looking to talk about O-Town as a place, and that may then become your main character, and the music then is part of that story. But I'm not fully grasping kind of what is going to be that main character thread. Is it going to be O-Town, or is it going to be focusing on particular musicians and the history of the music of the era?
Well, the main character thread is Otara. And so Otara, for mine, is, I'm born and bred in the area, so it has a number of different iterations. The early days, the struggle of newness, OMAC, the rise of poly pop. Unfortunately, after 9 years of particular tenure, a particular political tenure, it's not good in Otara at the moment. Yesterday's budget hopefully makes it better. And so in the third part, the struggle is as real as it was in the 70s and 80s. And so I'm seeing things there that I have not seen in probably 2.5, 3 decades. And so Otara is the entwining tapestry that ties this together as a documentary with music that runs through the backbone of that and telling their story.
So it's for a web series, right?
No, it's for a
full feature.
Pitching it as a feature.
It's a feature doco. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Notice how, so the same question got asked 3 different ways by 3 different people, and this answer was the best of them. So he found his way to it, but imagine if he had given this answer to that first question, they could have asked other questions, and they could have gotten deeper into stuff.
Last one.
I'm Dana. Your presentation is so personal, right? You led us through this very artistic journey. Was that your own writing at the beginning, with the rap in the beginning? So, no.
Yeah, the actual one, yes.
So, I think
no, it's not.
we're feeling 2 different things, right? And we're feeling like a place that is unfamiliar to us, and you're giving us this key to it through music, which is universal and a great gateway. And I can hear from you speaking to us now. There's a lot of social things that you want to touch on too. So I think what is missing is that connection for us. And a lot of times we want a main character or a person to tell us that story. And maybe what you have here is a little more avant-garde than that. And maybe it isn't as traditional, right? And we're trying to like hook our brains on that today. And so it's a combination of seeing you in person, which is beautiful and personal, but then maybe it's not necessarily translating to the work sample, which is giving us kind of a vibe and a feel for a community. So I think that's where the disconnect is a little, and we'll talk more in person. I don't want to monopolize it, but I think the place, what Christine was saying, is like we're interested, we're intrigued. We're just maybe we're just not exactly sure our entry point. And last thing I'll say is you mentioned that it's going to be chronological, and my little lizard brain wants to start from here and to be like, what is this place now? Because I think if I waited until the end, like Act 3, to be like, this is what it is now, I'd be like, I don't know. I really want to see this place now. And the kid on the bike, like I was like, oh, who's that? I want to see more of him. Who's that guy talking to us in the yard and stuff? So I was leaning into the present day. So I'm going to stop talking. No, that's bad.
Can I just add as well? I thought your pitch was great. I love the reel. But the young boy, that's when I really leant in and thought, hang on, there's something here. So I think there's something about youth, whether it's in the different generations that you're going to show or something, it's just something about that hook.
Can you pause for a second? One of the I pitch all the time because I think you can develop by pitching too. And so if I'm working on stories, I will talk those stories through. I'll talk them through with anybody who will fucking listen to me. And I should apologize when I get excited. I start swearing like a sailor. I should have control of that, and I don't. But this kind of feedback is invaluable. Like you have a tendency when you're getting pitched to is to give back the things you're confused about, you don't understand, or like even right now I'm just talking shit about these two guys who are probably really sweet dudes. But also if you're ever getting pitched to and you come back with where I really hooked in was this moment. That's great feedback too. You shouldn't just be talking about the stuff you're criticizing. If you're talking about the stuff that I'm really interested here in that. If you give a pitch, if the first time you give a pitch to another human being is that person is someone that you need to make a good impression on, you have done something wrong. Give pitches to people who already like you. And then eventually you get to a place where you give pitches to people who hate your guts, but they can't deny how awesome your story is. That's when you're ready to go and pitch to people who matter.
I'll just pick up on that because I was thinking about this. If you ever have a chance when when you have your idea and it's the little kernel of the idea and then it builds and turns to something else, if it from the first moment you had the idea or at any given point, you ever have a feeling that makes you want to do that thing, then you get that rush where you hit some sweet spot or you found something out in that process about the idea. If you ever have that feeling about something, write it down and harness it. That's the first thing you should do in a pitch. If you felt that way about something, that's what you do. And if you've got a couple of minutes, I'll give you a perfect example of this because I only thought of it yesterday. And I realise I do it all the time now as a habit. I was making a film in 2014 in Melbourne somewhere and accidentally saw something at a craft fair. And it was about these women selling high-end organic chicken feed in a blow-up tent at this fair, and I just couldn't get out of my head. What are they doing? Who are they selling it to? Terrible business model this must be. And eventually I went over to them and I said, so excuse me, I'm just so intrigued. Who's buying all of this chicken feed? And they look at me like I'm stupid. And they're like, only all the top breeders on the national show circuit. I'm like, sorry, and my heart's like, I'm like, the national show circuit? Are you saying there's a best in show for chickens? And they're like, yes. But it's real? Of course it's real. And the rush surges over you. There's a world of competitive avian pageantry out there. I can't take it a bit. And my skin's buzzing. I'm looking at Mike, and Mike's like, and the time we get in the car, he goes, it's called Pecking Order. And I'm like, 24 hours later, I'm on the phone because I had an open line with the film commission at this stage. They're like, you just call us if you had anything. I just got on the line to Lisa Chatfield, I think it was. Slavko, what do you got? I'm like, not much, just best in show, pause, with chickens. But it's real, I'll be in touch. Just get an email, done. That was it, because she screamed with laughter. And that feeling, right, when I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I couldn't believe what I heard. Just pass it on. She couldn't believe it. We went around the film commission, no one can believe it. All of a sudden, everyone's coming back, what's this about the chickens? And it's done, right?
That should be a shirt.
That feeling you ever get, sometimes it'll be tragedy or horror, sickening, this is atrocious, I'm appalled. Any powerful emotion that rocks you, that's your lead in the pitch. Transmit that immediately in front of other people.
So my question to that is, how important is a good logline?
Yeah, a logline's something you'll develop after you've got a killer title, or sometimes there'll be working titles. But as long as you've got that emotional, powerful hook on a story. If I come in and talk to you, I take you into a world and this is what's happening, blah, 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 and then I stick that magical hook or twist in there that's irresistible because I've had that feeling of, okay, this can't not be told. And I transmit that to you. We're talking.
Yeah,
we're having a chat. Yeah.
And something like it's best in show with chickens and it's real requires an understanding of what Best in Show the comedy was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a understanding your audience enough that if you're talking to Lisa Chatfield, of course she knows Best in Show the Chatfield.
Yeah.
And so Best in Show the Chatfield. And so that's part of it. So, and I would say that's probably a tagline instead of a logline. We got to get into technical stuff, but getting across your the nugget of your idea, or in this case, the emotion of the idea, conveying that emotion immediately that's the fish hook, and then you just got to reel it in.
And do you say is that a good strategy in a pitch to kind of start, like hit people with that at the start?
Oh yeah. I mean, a pitch will always be different, and that comes down to who's your audience, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll start and it'll be your colleague, the person you'll be working with first, the producer you want to go to. Maybe it's you're going straight to the film commission. It'll depend on who you're talking to. Who is that person? You know, are they, like I think of Sue Woodfield, you know, who's such a hard ass. And I love pitching to hard asses, right? It's going to be hard, but my game's going to have to be up here. But if I can get that laugh, if I can get that smirk on their face or slam of the leg and stuff, we're talking, we're in, you know? And it'll always be different how you do it. But sometimes, you know, when you've developed relationships, I'll just come in.
Yep.
And I'll be like, all right. and just lay down some line that I think is hilarious, but that sums things up.
Yeah.
So I can get the conversation started. I want to delight you. I want you to laugh or go, fuck, no, really? And if I can get that, I'm like, and that's nothing. And then I'll start telling a story. I didn't even think of it as a pitch.
Some side benefits to that as well. That kind of, I'm going to call up Lisa Chatfield. You stay on Lisa's radar. You, in a way, you're doing some market research, because she could have said, oh, sorry, somebody's already 6 months into that process. In which case, you're not going to waste a whole lot of time on a project that somebody else is on. And also, if nobody else is doing that, you just kind of pissed on that tree. You're like, this is mine now. I got it. And so there's an argument to don't tell your ideas to anybody because you're afraid they're going to steal them.
Which I believe, I must say.
My argument is tell your ideas to fucking everyone, because then everyone will know it was your idea if somebody else tries to use it.
There's that truth too that exists.
I piss on all the trees, all of them.
I tend to peer out the window, paranoid, looking through the curtains. Slavko, it's been 5 years, pitch it. You have to cross a line at some point, right?
Some point.
Yeah, still terrifies me. They're gonna steal it.
Slavko, could we maybe talk a little bit about your famous Vista marketing pitch for Pecking Order?
Oh yeah, well that's a whole different level of pitch. That's competitive pitching. And I'll say a little thing here for my Christchurch people because it's important, but how you address your attitude around this is important too. I'd made Pecking Order, I think. Yeah, we had a beautiful trailer. We'd even done market testing by that stage, and we're preparing to go into the marketing phase. And Vista has this thing where over a period of, I think, 3 or 4 weekends, everyone gathers every weekend for an intense workshop to prepare to pitch over 2 days to win the $75,000 for marketing. It's with 1 weekend to go that my distributors contacted Film Commission to be like, why isn't Slavko invited to this? You know, I'm one of 6 filmmakers who's made a film and is supposed to be there. Oh God, of course, yes, get Slavko along. I've got to be careful what I say here because don't view it as a bad thing. There's an unconscious bias, I think, south of Auckland and Wellington. Rather than fret about it or worry about it or poor us or anything like that, you just got to be aware of it. No one means any harm whatsoever. You're just not on the radar. It's up to you to find out about something, and that's where Bree is, you know, our champion now. You know, Bree will keep us in touch or connected or we talk to each other. If something's going on, you've just got to get yourself there. So I only had 1 weekend to go in, prepared like for 2 days, writing, you know, 7 minutes long. There are 2 of them over 2 days, super competitive. And Ray Straish, who's the marketing manager of Fox Searchlights there, Anik Poirier of Entertainment One, like top of their game, hard asses, you know, you're not getting away with anything, and the judges. And you'll be trained and trained properly. Like I'm going to get up there, I'm going to know every word I'm going to know exactly when I'm coming in at 1 minute 43, press a button that's going to play at 3 minutes and 2 seconds, like airtight. And yeah, I went in there confident, because there's no other way, but also knowing you had a great trailer. I know what I'm going to say. But I also changed it when I started seeing what everyone else did, right? So there's a whole room full of people. They call out the name of a team. The team gets up and they sit behind a table and chair facing the judges sitting there. And they sit there and they talk and maybe go to the screen and do what they're supposed to do. And I had the advantage of going last. And so I thought, no. So I just got up and calmly removed all the desks and chairs out of that space, and it meant everyone's just going, what's he doing? What's this guy doing? I'm commanding my space. It's a stage, and we're going to play. And I got up there, and I started with a question about chickens. It was something absurd. I just said there are 7.125 billion people on the planet. Can anyone tell me how many chickens there are? That response. And I'm like, look, a number, please. And someone was like, 8 billion. Someone's calling out a number and stuff. And I'm like, 22 billion chickens. How do I know this nonsense? Let me tell you a story. And I went back into story mode, who I am, how I found out about it, whatever. And I'm like, and I just kept ratcheting things up and hitting it. But the entire time, I used chicken puns. And they were atrocious and brilliant. And everyone's just having a field day. So you got a receptive audience. It went down really well.
And you won, right?
Second day, upped the game again and won. Yeah, it was good. But it was very, very controlled pitch, right? There's no,
How long
there's no winging it.
Pitch? 7 minutes.
7 minutes each, I think.
Each day?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I was lucky enough to be there that day.
Oh,
and,
right.
Yeah, it was supreme. It was very, very funny. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of levity, and then those puns went viral within the team that was trying to make the decisions, and they were all punning to one another in the decision-making process.
Yeah,
it's clever.
Nice.
Yeah. So John Barnett and Dave Gibson doing a pun-off. It was kind of
So it was,
yeah.
it was good, yeah. So it just happened to be that I had a humorous bent to the film. It was light-hearted, witty, warm-hearted, all those things. If those are your things, milk those things. If you were like with Jazz, with Jessica's Tree, and you
Suicide.
had that, game on in that competition. Because if I was her and I had that stuff, I would think, no, sorry, this sounds aggressive and competitive. It is, right? I would have looked at me and gone, I'll piss all over you with your chickens, and you know what I mean? Because I got this shit that matters in a very big way, and I'll bring my drama A game and mess you up. And this sounds awful, but you better believe, when I first came in, I'm the last one to come in on that weekend, I wasn't welcomed.
By the other pitchers.
These Aucklanders, that's their turf, whatever. Oh, we'd like to introduce Slavko coming in. from Christchurch. He won't be a problem. You know what? It was competitive, and you're like, we'll see. And yeah, you use what you've got. Humour. Out of the way. Bad puns. There's a lesson.
Just a question about knowing your audience. I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about like cultural differences and like pitching internationally, pitching to people that you've never met before, that you have no relationship with. Steve, I know you've pitched to like Chinese investors.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about those experiences and how you approach them?
We've been talking a bit about, like a lot of our examples have been sort of a performance pitch thing, and the examples we've shown have been performance pitches, and that's a whole thing. But in the industry itself, usually you'll be doing a room pitch. You'll be in a room with people who are across the desk from you. And a lot of times you go in there and you're really easy to get to the meat of it, but there's usually 5 or 10 minutes of bullshitting. Use it. Use that time. Don't rush past it, because this is when you're metaphorically smelling each other's butts.
Yeah.
Sometimes literally. I miss Hollywood sometimes. But, this is when you're trying to figure out their sense of taste. This is when you're trying to figure out if they'll laugh at that kind of joke. and trying to, like I said, the Lindsay Lohan horse tranquilizer thing, or I've said that joke 1,000 goddamn times, but when I started going, it'll just roll off my tongue. And if you're in that sort of, especially if you're not that comfortable in these situations, because you're like, I need to get to my pitch because you're a big deal, and I need to figure out some of those things that you can just click on in your head, and you'll rattle through something, and your mouth will be talking while your mind is like, look who's paying attention to who's the power person in this room, who actually gets to make the decisions. This person is asking all the questions, but they always look over to this person to know if it's okay to keep moving on. Laugh with this person, sell to this person. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it depends also in terms of cultural etiquette as well. Americans, as you might tell, we're hard salespeople. We're raised to believe that the tallest poppy gets the most sunlight. And so a lot of times Kiwis go into an American situation, and you're all so damn humble. And we're like expecting, in America, you overpromise and underdeliver, and we just expect it. And Kiwis underpromise and overdeliver, but that underpromise means you don't get hired in the first place, and so you don't have the opportunity to show that you will overdeliver. China is a whole different thing. I've been to China 8 times now. The first time was with the Film Commission. And like typically in a Chinese situation, your first 4 or 5 meetings, you don't discuss business at all. Because contracts don't really matter there, only a personal relationship actually matters. And so you're spending time just hanging out, like the famous business drinking. That's so you can see it, is because if somebody's really nice when they're sober but a prick when they're drunk, they're actually a prick. And so there's all that stuff going on. So that's a thing that you can these days do a lot of research online. If you're pitching in a culture that's not your own, and just because you all speak English doesn't mean it's your culture. If you go to the UK, it's a whole different thing too. There's a lot of stuff. If you are this and you're operating in this situation, this is some stuff you should know about. Also, that matters if you're going into subcultures as well. A lot of times if you're doing a show that's aimed at a specific niche audience, you're going to be talking to people about that audience. And if you're not part of that audience, you've got some pits of lava that you could fall into. And quite often you'll be selling to potential funders who are in that whatever group that is. And if you say the wrong thing, or if you come across as if you're ignorant, you just killed your entire pitch. So if you're talking about an audience that you are not part of, you need to absolutely be get yourself on board with whoever those people are, whether it's chickens or people with leprosy, I don't know. Don't give yourself leprosy just so you can pitch well, but know what you're talking about, especially if you're going to be talking to people that's part of a certain group.
And you're talking about pits of lava. What happens, like worst case scenario, if it's just falling flat, it's not engaging?
There's sometimes a freedom to that. Let me talk about 2 situations. Sometimes, like let's say you've got an idea, you've teamed up with someone, you've got some access to, let's say, the American system, and you're going to go over to America for 3 weeks, and you're going to do 21 pitches of the same project. This one project, you're going to pitch 21 times. You want to get the potential buyers or partners that you don't particularly care about first, because you want to fuck up with them. You want to have the opportunity to be in that room and say things wrong and mess it up and have that experience of digging yourself out of a hole, because you can't dig yourself out of a hole, and figure out where it fell apart. And if it's falling apart in the same place multiple times, probably you haven't done enough practice with people who don't matter. But now you're figuring out, by the time you get to the people you really want, which is usually like halfway or 3/4 through, those where your real A game needs to be, because by the end you get tired. So you want to schedule it that way. But one of the benefits of that also is, one of the best things to remember when you're doing any sort of pitch where there's actually business on the line is the people you're pitching to need you just as much as you need them, right? The buyers are desperate and everyone is terrified. We are all terrified because it's chaos. Nobody knows what the hell is going on in the world right now. And so if you can come in, like I said before, and say, I understand what your problem is, here I have a solution, you're 75% there. Doesn't matter. If you go in, and because of that, if you go into a pitch, it's kind of like a first date. Everybody's on their best behavior. And if you ever go to a pitch and you're getting a real skeevy vibe, or they're being arrogant, or they're trying to make you feel like you're small or anything like that, this is the best they're ever going to be to you. So bail the pitch, bail it. And then what I find glorious is, especially if I know I'm going to have a few of those that I'm likely to, and because ask around people, it's a relatively small industry, the people who are likely to be dicks to you. Pitch them anyway, because what the hell? Go in, they're a dick to you, start just making shit up as you go, and intentionally shit can your pitch just to see what happens. There's nothing, like, you're not going to sell that person anyway, it doesn't matter, but there's nothing more freeing than bombing on purpose.
Have you ever done that?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Can you give us an example?
Love it. I think I was pitching an action drama with an LGBT lead to someone who immediately I said it was LGBT. Not only to say, oh, that's tough for market, they just came across with some homophobic shit. And I'm like, oh, you motherfucker, okay, here we go. And I just started I turned it into a comedy, and I put all of the pro-gay stuff I could think of in it. And by the end, the entire world had turned gay. And everybody loved it. It was fantastic. And I just saw him just getting angrier and angrier. And from the rest of that week, anytime I was in the pitch and it started going a little sideways, I remember back to that guy's face, and I'm like, this is awesome. I have so much more to give to this project now, because I'm in this and I really want this to happen. And because he was so upfront with such a dick he was also saying some of the stuff out loud that everybody else was kind of not quite saying out loud, but was in their heads. But because it had been so bald with that guy, and then I had changed my pitch to just hit all of those buttons on him, I knew what the buttons were. And so later on in the week, because I think I did 30 pitches of that project, never sold it, because this was before LGBT were allowed to be a protagonist, because the world is dumb. And but by the time I was, 4 pitches in, since I knew all those buttons, I knew with some people I was just going to hit them straight on, because that would be fun. And for some people I knew what the buttons were, so I'd do these little end runs around them so they didn't think they'd be a problem. And there's nothing like being, it's a little like being up, I don't know if anybody who's ever tried stand-up, but you get up and you start going wrong. Stand-ups will engineer out points. Like if you're in a premise and you've got 6 jokes based on this premise and the premise just isn't working, cut it at 2 jokes, cut it at 3 jokes, and go to your next premise. And if you're doing your pitch, and I know during my pitch I have to hit my story structure, I have to hit my characters, I have to hit the business side of stuff, I have to, if you're doing a documentary, like the process of how you actually get stuff in the can, and then what to do with it, all those things, those are each different premises in your stand-up routine. And one thing's just not hitting, go to the next bit, because they might be someone who's really concerned about budgets. And if you're talking about narrative and character, and they're just waiting for you to get to budgets, One of the things, like you can tell I'm a fast talker, and when I get nervous, I start talking even faster. And I start tap dancing, I start juggling, I start shooting fireworks up in the air, and that's terrible. Because the faster you talk, the more people are like, well, I'd only have to listen every 3rd word, and I'll get the kind of the point. And so for me personally, when I see the attention starting to waver in the room, I take the room back by slowing down. And the people who were looking at their phones or doodling on their thing, they hear the pause in the room, and suddenly there's a breath, and oh wait, I have to zone in again. So that happens if you're a fast talker like me. If you're a slow talker, it's a different thing. But figure out your way of, oh, I've lost the attention of the room. Okay, great, it's going to happen. Hopefully you've practiced your pitch enough that you know where those bits are, and you've plastered over those bits or made those bits better, but it's always going to happen. So figure out 5 or 6 different ways to get the room back, and that a lot of that will depend on your own personality and your style. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
To the being, what was the original question? Being caught.
I don't remember.
Being caught in a.
How to recover the room if it falls flat.
Oh, I had one of those in Toronto, 2017. I'd been working for years on a film that would have been my best film, and I'd pitched the hell out of it for 2 years, which started with overcoming the people I worked most closely with, who were like, no, you can't do that, Slavko. You can't do that, no. Watch me. So I'd go away and I would research for another year and make it so airtight. And this is an incredibly arrogant thing to say, and I normally wouldn't do it. I believed so much in what I was doing that I took that extra year to completely change how they viewed that subject. Big call, so believed in it. And I did. And I persuaded the people I would be working with that it was the right thing to do and that it was magical, and they were like, I'm 100% behind that. Great. I had to do so much work to do it. I was incredibly confident. Next stage, I went to a distributor, a Madman, pitched to them. Done. We're attached. Boom. I'm like, now I'm going to go talk to Anik at Entertainment One and get sales. This is before I even start the film, right? Pitch to her, loves it, she's in. She starts talking to other people. And this is in Toronto, and then we meet in Melbourne, and then we're covered 3 cities, and then back in Toronto. Loving it. It's building, everyone's on side. Got it all sewn up. And then they bring in their lawyers. Because there's this risk involved, and my risk assessment for the film is that it's 50-50 I would survive to the end of the film in making it. And I knew it, and I'd done insurance assessments and risk assessments and everything I could, and put that to the lawyers. And there are these lawyers sit there in this meeting. Everything changes. Whereas everyone's been your ally, loving it all over you, the sharks come into the room. They don't give a fuck about anything. They come after me, and they're ruthless. It was very, very unpleasant. And that's their job. Rip me apart, tear me down to see if I'm full of shit or if this thing's going to fly. And it was possibly the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Because all of a sudden you went from having the best pitch of your life, and it was the best pitch of my life over a period of years. Best work I've ever done. And they were won over. And they were like, yeah, all right, you're good. But it was deeply unpleasant. And there was no thawing out the room. I was not in control. It was an icy room. And if I didn't like it, I could get out. It was going to be icy. Bear it, and I did it. And everyone signed off and like, let's do this. And then going to the people with money, executive producers and private financiers, to get money. Turns out people don't want to fund something where the filmmaker dies halfway. And in that particular way that I would die.
I'm so fascinated.
No.
Like, this is a great pitch. I'm in. Come on.
Yeah, no, I won't tell you, because you'll be cursed with wanting to make it. Because every person, I'm not being a dick, but every person who's heard it, some were hard to convert. Others were like, you did 2 sentences in. Oh, yeah, well, where do I sign? Oh, this is unbelievable. Are you sure? And then I'm like, yes, no, I'm prepared to die for your film. And it's just a deadly killer pitch that has to happen.
No pun intended.
Or was it? And, just 2 months ago, I had to think to myself, it's in the bin. There's nothing I can do about it. I do my job, get a sales agent, distributors, all those people. It is actually their job to get that money. You don't have to get all the money, you can get some of the money. Like, if I die at that point, you only spent that amount of money. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was really fair and reasonable about it. And, yeah.
So we're running out of time, unfortunately. Yeah. We've got about 5 minutes left. Is there any...
Can I say my gotta go thing?
Yeah.
I have to get on a flight this afternoon, so I would love to be able to just hang out after this whole thing is over and just shoot the shit, but I can't. But my email is steve.barr, B-A-R-R, @tvnz.co.nz.
And he does have business cards too.
And I have a pocket full of business cards, anybody wants them.
Are there any questions before we break? No? Okay.
I suppose too, budget, When you, Slavko, when you think about, when does that come in, your concept of budget, when does that come in to your equation?
First of all, I'll just allow myself to have the idea. And as a producer, that producer brain is always just hovering over you. Oh, I'll go here, I'll go there. Because you want to allow yourself to let the idea come out fully and let it breathe and be all that it should be. Let it be beautiful. And then afterwards go, well, that would cost $3 million. Yeah. So I check myself constantly. I'm aware of what something would cost to do it right. And then at the point where I talk to my distributor and go, here's the pitch, and you pitch it, pretty quickly, midway through just pitching it to them, they're like, 1.2, and I'm like 1.1. Yeah, we're on the same page. You can very quickly after a while go, that's a 1.2. Oh, no, it's an 800, or if it's local, you could pull it off for this. It happens quite organically, I think. But by the time you get to someone like Steve, you better know, you know, what that is, because you're going to be asked quite fairly, and it matters by the time you get there. And it's just professional. The last pitch I did at TVNZ, I hadn't been, like I say, for 10 years there, but I went and pitched something in December. Great fun pitch. Never heard back. But anyway, but it was still a good pitch. I knew the cost of one thing, because I'd kind of done it in episodes. It was not an issue. The other thing, because it's big, I was honest and said, you know, this was always supposed to be for an international market. It's only because I saw you the other day that I thought, no, it could work in New Zealand. It is expensive because of the following things. I'm not a TV producer, like serial TV producer. I'm going to contract the best one I know that I want to work with. And should you like it and want to go to the next stage, we'll have discussions and come back to you with that exact amount. So I was aware of what I didn't know for good reason, shared it honestly about it, and they were like, oh no, fair enough. We'll let you know if it gets to the next stage.
I just want to know where the query letter comes in. I know it's an aspect of your pitch or could be a part of your log line when you're actually pitching to producers or other aspects of the industry.
This is a 40-minute conversation that I'll try to say in 40 seconds. There's a lot of differences internationally and even in New Zealand about how query letters work. And it depends also on the medium that you're working in, whether it's doco, TV, feature, whatever it happens to be. The best thing about a query letter is to be as short as possible, and you get across a few sentences about why you're awesome, a few sentences about why the thing is awesome, and then wait. If you want to do like a 1 or 2 page pitch document, quite often these days those are pretty well designed, like they're pretty to look at as well as having great content in them. So a lot of people who aren't already working with a production company or producer will send in just something that's just text. And as much as we like to think that we judge the thing fairly, we're human beings, and something that's pretty is going to be better. The best thing you can do is shorter is better. You just want to, all you want to do is crack the door open a little bit, because what you want is starting to have a either face-to-face or voice-to-voice relationship as opposed to just something on email.
So you can actually pitch them in like a 3 acts in that letter if you need to.
I would just give the premise. You know, because a lot of the stuff that we get, we're trying to change things that, speaking specifically to TVNZ now, there's been, for years and years, people would put 100 hours into a packet that we would say no to based on the first paragraph. That's wasting everybody's time. It's a terrible way of doing things. So now we've got a thing that all we want is 2 or 3 pages, that's it. And we'll say no to most of them, and then we will request full packets from other people.
So that's more to do with the treatment than the...
Yeah. But in the first place, a few sentences, you know? And if you can't tell us your story in a few sentences, it means you don't understand your story yet.
Yeah. True. Okay, we do need to have a break, but please thank Steve and Slavko for being with us today.
Very welcome. Pleasure being here with you.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hope you're feeling refreshed and inspired. I'd like to introduce Jane Robertson and Jude McLaren. Thanks for being with us today, guys. Really appreciate you giving up your time to be here. Jane, could we maybe start with you? Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
Sure. In fact, Jude and I both went to broadcasting school, so it feels very nice to be
Deja vu. Yeah.
So my name's Jane Robertson. I'm a producer, and I am a producer with the Gibson Group. which is one of the oldest production companies in the country, Wellington-based. And I've been with them on and off for about 10 plus years.
We
Maybe
begged
more
you
than
to
that
come.
now. Yeah, so I primarily have worked in television, making documentaries and factual series, children's shows, for about 16 years now. Also worked overseas. And I've also worked with Jude.
A lot. Is that the segue to me? Hello, people. So I'll start with where I am now, which is the New Zealand Film Commission. So don't blame me for everything. I am not the commission. I am the representative today. I work in talent development, and I've got a very strange title called Talent Pathways Manager. And sadly, there is no pathway. That's what I generally start with people. But I might help you find a map. And the map is really from where you are. So I work with filmmakers predominantly, but with storytellers, and helping them to progress from short form to long form. And you'll notice it's about screen stories rather than specifically about film, and it's about storytelling. So yes, broadcasting school, Gibson Group, 13 years at Gibson Group, worked in documentary, and we grew our documentary space from one-off when I first started to multiple series, multiple, factual series, you name it, we'd done it. We actually got to a point where we just actually physically couldn't cope with the amount of work. And then I worked in drama post-production and then development. And now I'm working with short filmmakers, and I work with them to develop their stories, and I'm part of the funding process for short film, but I deal a lot with story and story development.
Great.
However, you're going to segue into how we both sit here.
Before we do that, though, I just want to reiterate what I said in the beginning, that please feel free to jump in and ask questions at any stage. But just please wait for the mic so we can get your questions recorded. Yeah. But yeah, please tell us. So you guys have a little bit of history developing this documentary film of yours, Jane. Do you want to tell us?
Yeah. Well, Jude, you saw it first.
I did. I was, as part of the talent development work at the Film Commission, we attend a lab, and a director's lab called Accelerator as part of Melbourne International Film Festival, and we were there. And Tess, who is the director of the documentary, there's a pitching session, and it's quite. They say it's quite casual. Like they try not to tell the filmmakers because everybody freaks out. So it was casual. Tess was the last to pitch of about 20 people, and it was in a tiered environment. You could have heard a pin drop. She was really, really nervous. Like she was shaking. She was so nervous. But she has a sort of a steely interior. She is the what's the iron fist and the velvet glove sort of scenario. She pitched the story, and I went up to her, and Jane will tell you what the story is, but it is very much about it focuses on Tess as part of that story. And afterwards, I was really moved by the pitch, and it got me. And it got me because we've done, a lot of development. I went up to Tess afterwards and I said, you've got to make that story. And if there's anything I can do, and I was thinking, oh shit, she's like in Australia and I'm at the New Zealand Film Commission, what am I doing? That was part of my brain going, you bad person. But I just said, you have to tell that for yourself, and if there's anything I can do. Well, she stayed in touch with me for 2 years. She got Screen Australia development funding of about 10,000, wasn't it?
Film Victoria.
Film Victoria, sorry, pardon. Australia, it's from Australia. So, love it how they say that. Yeah. And then, she said, I've got this funding, and I'm going to need to do some research. And so that's when I sort of thought, oh, okay, this story is really based in New Zealand. And I said to her, I think you're going to need a producer. I happen to know one who I think would be really good. And I knew it would be right up Jane's alley. I was just like, Jane. And I also introduced her to Tim, is it Bicknell? McKinnell, there you go, as I knew it was at a Kinnell on the end of it. Tim McKinnell worked with Michael Bennett. He was one of the people that broke the story about Taina Polder, and Prisoner T, and I had talked to him at a film festival, and I just knew that they were going to need his kind of expertise as well. So I introduced them. It's something I do. I match people. And Jane, take it away.
So Jude connected me with Tess, who's an emerging filmmaker in Melbourne. And Tess has made lots of award-winning short dramatic films. She also tutors at Melbourne University and works in the industry in television, working on lots of things from films through to reality, through to lots of things. But this film is something that she's been wanting to make for a long time. And as Jude said, it's a challenging subject, and it's an area that I've worked a lot in television series and documentaries before. And so the story of the film, I'm about to pitch it to you badly probably now. And it's very interesting when you're pitching with another person actually. So I'm usually pitching with Tess, and we have a game going on when we pitch together. That's a very carefully worked out one. I have had to pitch it myself though as well. But the story, I'm not going to. Well, I will half pitch it. I won't do the whole pitch. The film begins looking at a really tragic case of a child who was killed in 2002 in Dunedin in a remote house in Port Chalmers. The child was died of head injuries, and there was evidence to suggest that she certainly was physically abused for at least a month before she was killed. And there were 3 adults in the house at the time of her death. The 3 adults, one of them was her mother, Iris's mother, a man and another woman. There was a 6 or 7 week court trial in the High Court in Dunedin. But at the end of that, the judge couldn't say who did it. And so there were charges laid. They were very lenient, but they were very small, sort of 18-month, 9-month stints in prison, charges of neglect and failure to provide care. The reason that we are looking at this case is because one of us is connected to it. Tess has always been interested in looking at violence in society. And so the film is a personal journey. It's Tess's journey from Australia through to New Zealand. So that's the film, and the film is it's an interesting film because it has that true crime genre about it, but it also subverts that, and it's from a unique perspective, Tessa's own personal journey and her view. So that is a very bad pitch actually that I've given you.
Well, it's interesting because actually the way in which she pitched it was how Tess herself pitched it, and that was the revelation. That's where we, you could see the room was really empathising for her because she was nervous, and she actually spoke quite quietly, which is actually quite a good thing to do sometimes, not all the time. But we were all leaning in. And that was when I went up to her and I said, but I personally felt for her as a human, a human journey, and I think that's why the story hits people, is that I respond to that emotional journey of another human being wanting to know who they are. And that's a big thing for me. It's sort of, personal development. Who am I? Why am I here? And that's Tess's journey as well. Yeah.
So when was the first time you and Tess pitched that together?
So we had the pathway. So the interesting thing is, this time last year, I was sitting in the audience, and we had not even.
That's right.
Tess and I had not met each other in person. We'd talked on the phone a bit, and we just knew that we wanted to work together because we just got on too. And that's another important thing about the director-producer relationship. We really got on, and you have to. but I was sitting in the audience here as you are now, and before anything happened in the past year that has happened to me, furiously taking notes down, because I think at that stage, and it was Jude up on stage, but with Jess Feast, another filmmaker.
Who we've also worked at the Gibson Group.
Yeah.
And
Sorry.
Steve has
And
also
Steve
worked
has
with-
to.
And
All
Steve
leaves
totally.
there.
Yeah.
Slavko
It was
will.
like, yeah.
No. Yeah. And I think at that stage we just found out we got into AIDC in Melbourne, the Australian International Documentary Festival there, which is a really huge one. And we discovered that we had been selected to pitch at the factory pitch session, and that was our. And so the first time we pitched was the day before our pitch. They hold a very good workshop where basically you and the rest of the people chosen, there's 15 people chosen out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds who apply. So that was the first time we'd pitched together, because we're in different countries. So that's always also an interesting thing.
Did you do any practice over Skype or
We
anything?
were going to. We furiously had written our pitch to each other many, many, many times, but no. We pitched, and it was not good. It was okay. We had that same reaction, rehearsal day. We had that same reaction where people were like, shit, but people were concerned and worried, and they were. So we had lots of people saying to us, you shouldn't be, I don't think you should make this film. I think it's really, because Tess was even more nervous than I was just then. I've pitched this film so many times, he's still nervous, but that's quite good sometimes. And the vulnerability of us came through in a not a good way. It felt like if you were a decision maker, you wouldn't invest in these guys, because they seemed like they were going into territory that was too tough, that they didn't know what to do, that they were nervous, that Tess seemed too vulnerable. The funny thing about Tess, as Jude said, is she's emotionally present, and of course the story is really a personal one, and that's good stuff to put in the pitch, because you have to be yourself and you have to be authentic, which is no views word, but it's so true, because people can tell when you're not. Particularly when it's a really personal story, but she didn't seem strong enough. So what we had to do furiously, had to work on, and that night and the next day, was shoring that stuff up. And that's where Tess had to be prepared for the questions afterwards that were going to be asked. I had to come in and say, this is a really complex story. It's a really looking at a challenging subject. I, as a producer, have been working in this area for years and years and years, which is all true. We're working with psychologists, we just hadn't said it in the pitch. Psychologists, we're working with an ex-detective, we're working with loads of people, and so we had to also shore up that side of it as well. So we had to change our pitch at the last minute, put everything, any weakness that we had to shore that up, answer it within the pitch, or be prepared for questions afterwards, and just come at it still with that same vulnerability, but with a strength instead. And Tess and I worked really a lot on also some of the things that Tess could say, which is one of the things she does say in the pitch is, I am compelled to tell this story because I want to prevent further deaths from happening. Actually, it wasn't as blunt as that. It was a bit more subtle than that, because it is a social issue film as well. And so, you know, and during that evening, while we were furiously working on it, we did have people come up to us who were part of that, who were pitching alongside us, saying, I'm really worried about you making this film.
And I had people at the Film Commission saying the same thing when they came in as well. They're like, oh, I'm really worried about that film.
Which
and
makes
I'm like,
Tess furious. Yeah.
But I mean, and because I know Jane so well, and I knew, that's why I put them together, because I knew Jane had the depth of experience. And we had developed prison families together, bullies,
trouble with murder.
You know, we'd done all these social conscience documentaries and series dealing with really difficult subject matter in broadcast television, which is not easy, because the broadcasters don't want to know. Sorry, Steve. You know, you're a poacher come turned gamekeeper, as I am, you know. And so, you know, because it's too hard. And I just actually was on the phone with Robin Scholl. She's making a very sensitive documentary, and I said to her, look, actually, she's putting in really great duty of care, but I said, actually, when you really need it is when it goes to air. because that's re-traumatises everybody.
Yeah.
Anyway, I knew that I knew that. And the other thing, when Jane and I met, so she was in your position, and I was talking to Jess Feast, and afterwards Jane and I went and had about a 2 or 3 hour, and it was a sober lunch, I'm just saying. But we went and we basically had a coaching session, didn't we? And one of the things, because you know, people in these positions, when they're making decisions about funding, or their programmers or their funders or whatever they are, financiers or distributors, they hear a lot of story. And Steve said it, and he said they use the D word, desperate, and they are desperate to hear a story that moves them emotionally. And that was the thing that I said to Jane, because lots of people, when they're pitching, they go in all factual, particularly with a TV background. And that's one of the big learnings I've had coming into the Film Commission from having a very strong television background, but developing films, is, you know, television is more factually based in terms of presentation of fact. Whereas Steve talked about it again, a film as a very character, they're looking for a character to take them through the story. And I just said, in a pitch, people are looking for an emotional journey, and they want to be moved. More than anything, they want to feel, and they want the hairs on the back of their neck to go up, and because they get the feels, you know, they know that it's happening. And then they want to know, how are we going to do that? And they start asking questions on the how. Or they try and solve your problems. And that's a really good, you know, you got them hooked if they start trying to solve your problems, answering your questions, asking you questions. So we had a big chat, and because I also knew Tess to an extent, we had a lot of conversation about how to take that emotional journey, and that's actually the strength of the proposition. It's not its weakness. Hey. And there were some few things you want to talk about the reel as well.
That's right. So we're talking about different kinds of pitches for AIDC in Melbourne, and for Dockage, and for we eventually ended up going to Europe. That's the end of our. It's the beginning, because you've got to make the film of the journey. But so we did. It was a performance pitch, and they are the same no matter where you go. When they're the competitive performance pitch, they're 7 minutes long. That will include a trailer. So we also got I think it was a BAFTA award-winning editor as part of the AIDC competition, who coached us through the trailer. Tess already had the trailer, but we recut it. But it's very strict guidelines on that 7 minutes of the pitch. If you go over time, it is considered very impolite. You are not practiced. Bells will go.
Yeah.
If you get the 7 minutes but you don't need it, should you make a pitch that goes the 7 minutes? If it's too short,
No, I mean, I think 7 minutes is the maximum.
Yep.
Is the maximum, and if you, it's just the standard time, really. If you can do it shorter, I think that's fine. And we would go about 6 minutes 30 probably.
Because then you have the feedback with the panel afterwards, so it just means you might have an extra minute or so discussing with the panel.
So that was strictly enforced, and then feedback questions from the and for AIDC, for Dockage, and for IDFA, you are performing on stage. I mean, AIDC is a huge auditorium, glass filled, tiers of seats. So you've got audience members. You've also got a big panel of international decision makers, broadcasters, potential funders sitting there waiting to ask you questions.
Can I just ask you on that, that night before when you were rehearsing and you were preempting the questions and stuff, what type of research did you do into those panelists?
A lot. So ahead of time, you will be told who the panelists are. So Tess and I would divide up the people and do huge amounts of research on who they are, if they're from Arte, if they're from, Mad Men, if they're from Submarine, and work out what other shows that they've done or films are like ours, so we could refer to them, who the person actually is. You can find a lot through Google. I even have here still. So these were for Data Doco, for Dockage.
Oh, yeah.
These are the people that we were assigned. I can't remember when I did this, but we wrote notes on all of them. I'd We're thrilled to be meeting you, Bernadine. We've, you know, Screen
Bernadine
Australia.
Lim.
Yeah. You know,
She's a
this was
doco
before we
maker as
even
well.
met them.
Yeah.
And all the connections I could think of that we had with each person as little cheat sheets. And so Tess and I would just study who was going to be in the panel, because you talk to them afterwards.
And you can kind of preempt the type of questions that they're going to ask you.
And we'd practice that too. So a lot of the work that we did was actually this time last year, during the first session, you played a couple of sessions from Doc Edge the year before, and there were questions in that.
Yeah.
And I had wrote them all down and wrote answers and sent them to Tess, and we did a lot of work.
Yeah.
Practice.
A lot.
Yeah, and one of the things that I thought was really good about what Tess and Jane did, because it could devastate you to get the kind of feedback 24 hours before a massive pitch, you know, and you actually have to take that as feedback, really valuable feedback. And there was a couple of this. So you also had somebody who gave you some really positive feedback, a guy from Al Jazeera, right? And he kind of said, and so that was really valuable, and probably shored them up so that they didn't want to, you know, go off and cry into a bottle of vodka somewhere. But he said, in a nutshell, he said, you've got something really special here, and he kind of gave them some insight, and that was the crime. Was it crime? What was his terminology? True crime.
True crime.
Yeah, but it's not absolute genre, but he said it's got that kind of flavour, and that's what will probably hook people in. And he gave you some positioning information, which is really, really important, which also might give you some comparables information. So then you can talk about films that are meaningful to the people in the room as well. So he was gold, and actually the other cohort people that were feeding back, they were also gold, if not devastating, but gold. So then they can address the weakness, because if you don't address the weakness, it's the elephant in the room. You need to talk about the elephant in the room. And this is the same for proposals, actually, in my opinion. If you think, you don't want to hide something, you want to actually say, you know, because people, you have to answer the question in the mind of the person who's either your reader or your panellist. And you want to get there first. That's the most powerful way to be, is that you answer that question, because it gives them, it assures them you know what you're doing, even if you don't, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I should say that our pitch wasn't bad at the practice pitch at AIDC. It was just tonally felt odd to people, and that was the subtle shift that we did to shore that up. And then we pitched, and then we won the Doc Edge prize. And then we went to Doc Edge, not far for me to go from New Zealand to Auckland, from Wellington to Auckland, and then we and similar 7-minute pitch with the trailer, questions afterwards, and then we won that, and which gave us the opportunity to go to Doc Leipzig in Germany and IDFA in Amsterdam, and for the Doc Leipzig, which is one of the oldest documentary festivals in Europe, and thousands of people go, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people go to Amsterdam. These places are huge marketplaces. They have the festival element where they're showing, you know, pre-Oscar winning, pre-whatever films there, like Doc Edge, but it's a huge marketplace too. So you've got industry sessions that happen in Europe, and at any moment you could be making a deal as well, and you're continuing to cultivate the relationships you've already made. Doc Leipzig is really interesting. We ourselves applied to be part of the co-pro market there, and that gives you the opportunity to be one of 35 selected projects if you get through from like 400 or 500 or so that apply from 32 countries, and you get the opportunity to pitch at a table, not in a performance space, at your table to over 45 different decision makers over 2 days in 15-minute slots.
So we're talking 8 hours, you pitch, 15-minute slots, 8 hours.
A day.
People. So you've got to get some stamina going.
That is so important, because you are selling a thing. But and that's the art of the pitch as well, and with your right trailer, because you are showing the cinematicness of it through the trailer. That's another conversation probably as well. But you'll be asked those questions during the pitch too, because you've got the story, the idea, beginning, middle, end in your pitch. But you also, if you're showing a trailer, that has to give you an essence of what the film is. And you know, that's another thing. But
and that's voice, because as a director, she's going to make those.
I mean, it's her film.
Yeah, it literally is her film, but it's also as that she is both the subject and the director. But it's the visualization of that story that's actually going to bring people into it as a cinematic experience.
It just reminded me the amazing coaching session I had with Jude before AIDC. A couple of things that you said that really have helped position the film for us, which we always see as being, it's telling a New Zealand story, but it's got global relevance, and it's working out when you are pitching to an international audience what that is and why that is. And there are a couple of things there, and it's the what is universal about what you are telling, and what is specific. And you talked to me, Jude, about there's a specificity with the story, but a universality as well, because it is about you know, a daughter seeking answers. It's about family. It's about identity in this particular case. It's about all those things. And the specificity is Tessa's personal journey. I did not make this up. Someone said it, and I can't remember who it was, but I always think of this with documentary. It's the biggest view through the smallest window is always, you know, is always the best. But that's, the pitching to an international audience, you have to, there's no shortcuts really you have to sort of define some of those things and feed that to them. I'm jumping all over the show a little bit now, but...
So did you, going to Leipzig, and with that universality in mind, did you kind of adapt the pitch or the specifics of it?
You're always adapting the pitch.
Yeah.
Always adapting the pitch, and never do not listen to feedback. Always listen to feedback and incorporate that into your pitch. So any questions that come up for people and you find they're common ones, put that into your pitch. And of course the performance pitch was different to then the table pitch where you're pitching to 45 people over 2 days, and that becomes more like a conversation. But we'd still play the trailer, so we had to be prepared with, you know, state-of-the-art headphones with iPads, everything charged, ready to go. Oh my God, it was crazy to play the trailer. But they all knew the project really before they came to meet us. They asked to meet us because you do like a dating kind of doco thing, matrix thing, is worked out for you. But yes, by that stage, and this is the other part of pitching, because you're at the very beginning stages, but you have to know everything about your film. You have to know the budget. You have to know what your distribution plan might be, or pretend to know it and talk about it confidently. You have to know who your audience is. That's so key. Yeah. You have to know what the story arc is, even for a documentary like ours, which is we keep saying true crime, and that's another tricky thing about genre, because in fact that's our entry in, but actually it's a A-list film festival film. Is the film that we are making. So you have to define that kind of stuff to people from the beginning. You also have to be willing to bend and shape, because if a big platform is interested, you know, yes, we do want to talk to you. You know, are you interested in you know, because also people these days are interested in the different forms that your film can take. Maybe it could be a feature, but could it also then go into being something else, cut in different cuts?
And you have to be prepared for all those eventualities.
All of that.
All those
all
permutations.
But from the beginning, so from AIDC through to Dockage, by that stage we'd already gathered up interest. And so the other part of pitching and developing a project is it's a full-time job to keep all those relationships going. So now at any one time, we're probably keeping relationships going with over 40 people, groups of people from all around the world.
And that's a quality problem, people, okay? So you know, and it was at AIDC where that interest came flooding in, didn't it? And everybody, then it was like, everybody wants to know you. You know, they suddenly were like all over you like a rash. And then it was that, and we talked about mentors being a really important part of this process as well. So Jane's got some really experienced mentors, and they've been advising her on, you know, what she should accept, or, you know, how to approach the situations and the offerings, how to keep things keep it warm, keep that relationship warm, because there's a thing in film where they, you know, about getting heat, and so that's hot, but you want to keep it going for as long as you can. And the challenge is, I'll get to you in a second. The challenge is, like, we're at 5 years from the moment I heard it to now, and there's been 2 lots of development funding, but the film is yet to be made. So just letting you know, you've got to be, it's a marathon.
We've got a question over here, and then we'll go over here.
Yeah.
Hi, we're hearing lots about trailers and the development. So looking at things like Seed, which is obviously for scripted, what's around for documentary to help you get, I mean, if you're not a producer like myself and you've got an idea, how do you get it to the point where you've got your trailer, you've got your ability and your resources to get to the pitch? Because we hear how whiz-bang it's got to be, but, you know, you've got your idea, you're not a producer, this is your first time doing this. What's the pathway in? Which is the development, where does that come from? Is there a way to apply for funding, and how do you do it? Do you need to have a director or a producer on board already? If so, where's the list of people that want to do that with you? Yeah.
And we'll be talking afterwards.
Oh, right. Okay, I shall pass this on.
That's just not a simple answer.
That's what I thought.
The short version is there is development funding, but actually something that Jane and I and you know, various conversations is you actually need to do a lot of speculative development before you actually apply for funding. And one of the things, and I'm coming from a short film perspective, okay? I am not in the features team, but I work with them. But my experience of short film documentary is generally not enough research has been done, and the clarity of the story isn't there. Now, short film's a little bit different because the structure is different and it's tighter, and it's what I call the deep niche. So there is funding. There isn't anything like Seed. Seed is the only funding in New Zealand where you don't require a producer. So that's a yes, you need a producer, but you really want to go and have a look at the DDF, Documentary Development Fund, and study that like your life depends on it. Have conversations. Like, don't just put something in there. Actually build relationships with people and find out and ask questions. So I'm happy to talk afterwards. I just don't want to take up all the time.
But I could just say, like, you know, with Jazz's pitch that we showed earlier, that wasn't really a trailer. That was just an interview that she shot.
Yeah,
so.
But you know, you don't necessarily need funding. Lots of people have already shot something. You do need it to be compelling. You do need it to be compelling. I think that's what I would say. Yeah. You can have not so brilliant vision. You've got to have good sound. So that's what I would say to you, because that can put people off like no tomorrow. They'll actually forgive a bit crappy pictures, you know, but they won't forgive bad sound. And you have to hone your short documents. That's another way of getting interest.
Over here?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. There's so much good juice here, and I'm more scared than I ever was. I don't think I'll ever move forward
Just
here.
keep breathing.
I just want to ask, you talked about mentors. Do you have any tips? Especially, I live in Wellington, so it's always a menagerie that you're scared to knock on doors. And have you got any tips of how to find your mentors and then try and secure some mentors? I think it's a great industry there.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean, and this is sort of applies. Doesn't matter which centre you're in, but specifically in Wellington, there's Emerging Artists Trust, which is a really great place to find mentors, and they have a mentoring service. It's a kind of a philanthropic funded organisation, but in general. The industry organisations like WIFT or like, you know, any of the guilds, Avocado, Dock Edge, you know, there's producers there, and it depends what role you're looking for, whether it's a directing mentor or whether it's a producer mentor. But actually just engaging and doing some research about people, like seeing things that people have made and going, wow, I really like that. And you're looking for tonally, thematically related to the work that you want to make, or they've got knowledge that would really be helpful, but you've got something, you need to be in an exchange with people. And it's a matter of, dating. I mean, Steve talked about it as well. It's that same thing though, when you meet somebody and you get that feeling like you can't even put words to it, but it's like, don't think that's the right fit. Trust that, because they're on their best behaviour. So values are another thing that I talk about with people when they're matching. Values, you cannot transverse values. They're kind of like real base things that you've got to make sure there's a match of values. And also that's a whole, what kinds of stories do you want to make? But you can just approach people.
Like networking is huge, and like just coming to events like this or BSS and Sparta and just meeting people and
and look at the funding sites, because all the funding information is published. So you can actually look at the production companies or the directors, or if it's a film, or those what I call the creative triangle. You can look at those people and start going, oh, that's a good person, that's interesting, I like their work. And there's nothing to stop you approaching them and having a conversation. The New Zealanders on the whole are very generous. Yeah. Steve, you got anything to add to that?
New Zealanders on the whole are very generous. There's frustrations in having an industry this small because we have more talent than we have resources.
Yeah.
But the great thing about it is that there are very few middlemen.
Yeah.
You don't have middle management, you don't have gatekeepers to get through. You can go to the actual decision makers, the actual doers of things pretty easily, and most of them have a copy with it.
And the interesting thing, as you were kind of, wafting out your email address there, this doesn't happen necessarily in other countries.
Oh God.
And people don't know that. I'll sit here and I'll give you my email address, or my team members, but depending on how busy I am. But Steve goes, he's the shizzle. He's like head of bloody drama at TVNZ, So, and he's going, drop me an email. It's like, that doesn't happen anywhere else. So, and also one of the things that Doc Edge do, they're facilitators and advocates for documentary makers, and they're also connectors.
Yep.
So any of the forums that they put on, they're trying to connect you with people. So it's that kind of organisation that can help you find people, and just have courage. You have got something to offer.
So I think we're up to IDFA.
Yes. So
Meanwhile,
does everybody know what IDFA is? No. So it's the International Documentary Film Festival Amsterdam, and it's like the biggest IDFA and Hot Docs, the biggest documentary film festivals in the world. It's like 3,000 people attend, 2 weeks. It's like the Cannes of documentary.
And AIDC stands for?
Australian International Documentary Conference.
So Australian.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so IDFA next level, same with navigating Amsterdam streets. So, which I found quite anxiety-inducing. I was quite tired by that stage too.
Yeah.
But no, that was incredible. And what you end up finding pretty quickly is the same decision makers and people part of that pitch world are going to all the same things. So you're having second and third coffees by that stage. This is quite a short space of time. And at IDFA they have, as part of our Doc Edge Prize, we were able to get access to some different academy sessions, and those are industry sessions. They were really, really interesting. Everything from filmmakers talking about specific things. There were some filmmakers talking about working with the enemy, so having main talent who were bad guys, and how you do that, how you navigate that, and duty of care, all of that sort of thing, through to a brilliant session, and it's for the first time I really understand the difference between a distributor and a sales agent. Yes. But don't ask me, I just need to read my notes. No, because in this day and age they're slightly nailed anyway. So quite industry specific sessions, and very, very, very good. But the most amazing thing is realizing that people, the documentary making community is the sort of the same no matter where you go, and that was brilliant and fantastic to just to meet other filmmakers too. At IDFA, the pitch, the main pitch there is another sort of competitive performance pitch. We also applied for that. We did not get in to that, but we were able to go and watch some pitches there. Similar format. You're pitching on a stage to a panel of people playing a trailer, 7 minutes, the same thing. Yeah, so that was amazing, being able to see all those different pitches from places around the world. Yeah.
And did you make any connections, like commercial connections?
Lots.
These 40 people that you're maintaining the relationships with?
Lots and lots. So we work tirelessly all the time because we really want to make this film, and we hope to be in production this year. And we also want it to be an A-list film festival film. So we want to go to the top and have people interested at the top helping us. And so also what happens is interesting things like, this is really good to know coming from New Zealand, halfway, the bottom of the world. Things happen like was it Leipzig? We were talent scouted by Doc Incubator. There's lots of post-production and development, but post-production workshop hothouses that happen. Doc Incubator is one, there's Sundance, and there's lots of others. What happens is they will pick projects and track you, and you pay to be part of the incubator. You can put it into your budget actually, but they hold your hand from early on, and they kind of, depending on what incubator it is, they will spit you out into Sundance, into all the main, whatever it is, all the main A-list film festival films. But they will, and they'll pair you up with, Oscar-winning, award-winning mentors. The Doc Incubator one is the producer, director, and editor, and they work with your film from rough cut right through to release.
So are you working with them now?
No, because we need to film first. Yeah,
right.
so that, we have not started production.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say one of the things I'm hearing, and we will get to your question. Sorry, I see you've got the talking stick. Does everybody know what the A-list film festivals are? Yes, no? Should I read them out? Because I always forget one.
Because there are official, there are the ones you imagine. There are official A-list film festival films.
So in terms of the New Zealand Film Commission, so A-list is seen as Berlin, Cannes, and there's 3 strands to Cannes, by the way. Cannes, a lot of people call it, but they call it Cannes. TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, that is. Venice, Sundance, and we've included South by Southwest. And so...
Could you include IDFA for documentaries?
Oh, sorry. Yes, IDFA would be. I beg your pardon. Yeah, but those are all from memory take docs.
Yeah.
And different countries can have slightly different ones. Screen Australia is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But they would have it.
Yeah. So there is, and there is a list on the Film Commission website. But that's, if you hear that stuff being bandied about, and then don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, you're not meant to know anything. That's something I really want to get across too, because there's a sense of sort of overwhelm sometimes, and the sense of like, oh, I don't know things, and it's like same, And Google is my friend, It's just like you can't know everything, so just begin at the beginning, but do research and ask questions.
Tony, question?
Speaking of which.
Yeah, look, you were talking about Amsterdam and you didn't get into the pitching session. So did you then see because that was Europe-based probably, is it? So did you think there was what they were after was different to a story from Down Under, which is...
Like the market?
Yeah, you know, was there a difference, you thought? And okay, they didn't want to,
No,
even though it's a universal
well,
story.
by that stage,
but-
we'd already been in Germany and pitched to the 45 or so people. So it was similar. We'd already had a sense then of what the scene is, I guess, over there. It's not different from. And we'd already been to AIDC, and that's an international kind of forum. Same with Doc Edge. It's the same stuff. People want good stories, compelling stories. There are certain flavours, I guess. So in Germany, there was a lot of Eastern European political documentaries, and maybe that was the thrust of the documentary that year, the festival that year too. There's a lot of interest out there, for example, in last year in personal stories. But you could probably say that is true all the step along the way. But it's also it's a taste of what's happening in the world is what people are interested in. And it's what is interesting about being over there is understanding people are interested in our part of the world. Yeah. They're really fascinated by what New Zealand is. They have an idea about what that is, and that may or may not be what you think it is, but people are interested to know, and they want to collaborate, and they want to do co-productions. It's a whole other thing altogether, but people are interested in New Zealand. What you have to know going over there to Europe is come up with a good pitch to tell those European potential funders and investors into your film why they would want to invest in your film, and that's the whole universality aspect of your film.
Because remembering, this is really challenging. There's a couple of things to remember. One is that we're spoilt for choice with documentaries and actually all content. There is overwhelming content, long form, short form, and for say for instance for streaming channels, they get saturated. So they move. So sometimes their tastes will move. They'll go, oh no, that was really working for us, like a year or 2 years ago, but actually we're over here now. And so sometimes there's a bit of a lag, the information that you've got, you might be seeing something screening, but you've got to remember that they're also developing stuff, and they've got a slate that they're working through. Does everybody know what I mean when I say slate? Just in case you don't, it's like a bunch of stories or a bunch of programs. And so, it's the people are interested in the voice here. They're interested in New Zealand, but one of the important things to remember is, I'm grateful that we're a peaceful country, but we don't have a war going on. Yeah. Because there's a lot of stories that come out of countries with a lot of political unrest. You see a lot of projects at IDFA about Syria and ISIS. And it's really difficult to compete with that because it's innately dramatic. And one of the words I want you to take to your heart, and not as a dirty word, it does start with C, but it's conflict, okay? And you just can't get enough conflict. And New Zealanders are risk averse to conflict. They're conflict averse. If I have one consistent note, and Steve is nodding his head like a nodding dog over there. Nice beard though. Thank you. Yeah, so it's conflict. And then there's a really great book that Jane and I, it's been like our Bible, and we actually got him over here, and that title is Conflict. And
Robert Thurkel.
Thank you, Robert Thurkel. And he did ask us, so how did I come to be in New Zealand? And we were like, that was us! Because I seeded that into Sparta's ear and said, bring him over. There's very few materials around documentary development. Nicola Lee's is another great, greenlit, and give me the money and I'll shoot it. So those 3 books, and sadly her website TV Mole, I think it's the furry animal that she was talking about. That was an amazing website for how to write a proposal and and I just basically downloaded it all. So yeah, those are great source materials for you people developing your work.
Yeah, I was going to say another, because that's the other thing, and you're talking about what was happening in Europe. some of the things that I do, as you can tell, lots of research and lots of reading of what's going on in the industry all the time. And one of the best websites for that is Real Screen.
Oh yeah,
It's really
yeah,
good,
yeah.
And you can join for free, can't
Yeah,
you? And you
yeah.
get sent emails like twice
Yeah.
a day. But that is what is happening around the world in documentary, all the festivals, what's being commissioned.
Yeah.
And you can sign up to like the IDFA newsletter,
Yeah,
the Doc
all of
Leipzig
that.
newsletter.
And you can see the sorts of things that people are making.
Yeah, and you do need to keep abreast of it. There's also a really fantastic in terms of documentaries, because that thing about distribution, that's one of the most difficult things, and the difference between television and film is with television you're working with a broadcaster and they're either going to put it on their online platform or on their channel, and they do a lot of work around marketing, and that's your distribution platform, if you like. Whereas when you're making a film, you've got to work that out for yourself. And that's really hard, isn't it? You know, and so again, you are going to feel dumb for quite a long time, and that's perfectly normal. And you actually have to do the research and the work to understand distribution. And everybody, it's like a problem area. It's like the void for all filmmakers, dramatic or documentary, and you just have to go through that learning process.
Jane, did you have any meetings with distributors over there?
Yes, we did.
Could you give us some learnings from that?
Yeah, what can I tell you about that? Don't be afraid to target the ones that you want to work with. It's a bit like working out who you want to work with. You have a look at their slate of films that they make. What do you like those films? Are they award-winning? You know, are they your taste? And then you want to go, hey, you know.
I have a question about profitability as part of your pitch and what you expect or they expect from you.
Profitability?
Given that documentaries are not profitable vehicles.
Right.
And so you're selling what are you selling if you're not selling some sort of recompense to the distributors?
Well, they can be. They can make money.
How many do I wonder? Is that what's the hit and miss rate? Do you know?
Yeah, I do. There's a whole, in my other notebook that at the Doc Edge last year, Annabelle did a really good kind of overview of the documentaries, the top documentaries, and you'll be so surprised about what the top documentaries are. I think
you know more than I do.
They're all music. So the top documentaries in the world are things like the Katy Perry documentary, the One Direction documentary, and Animals. Aren't they? So it's David Attenborough natural history ones. They're all the ones that make money. In New Zealand, it's sports and celebrities and singers. Not so much singers, but sports and celebrities are the ones that make a lot of money. So sports docs. That is a very complex question, though, the one that you have just asked, and it depends very much on the film, and it depends very much on where you see it.
And who you're pitching to.
Who you're pitching to.
It does come down to audience, and you don't always know who the audience is. You know, sometimes even the everybody gets it wrong. Like it's the dark arts. It's not an exact science, and you know, sometimes people think that the audience is going to be for a music documentary, they're going to be the people that love the songs that they made, but actually it might not be that. You know, and so you just, it's really challenging. Like, sorry, it's really challenging and it's really hard work, and you've got to love it. I think. I think that word "love" has been used in the previous, you know, sitting, and it's true. I wish I could.
But it's important that we discuss about how unprecise a lot of what we're doing is.
Yeah, unprecise, but
microphone behind you.
Yeah, but also you can be precise too, as much as you can. So, for example, with our film, it also has the social issue aspect of it, and there's a long tail these days to films, particularly if they're things like a social issue or it has an educative element to it, and they can live forever. And you know, and a lot of people are interested in those and want those and want to play those. So it has a greater good aspect to
social
it too.
Impact.
Social impact.
And there's some really great social impact. Doc Edge did a fantastic. They brought I can't remember the woman's
Melinda
name.
Wink.
Yeah, from Australia over, and she did this brilliant presentation of
Impact
the, yeah,
films.
impact. Sorry, I'm just losing it. Lights are hot. Social impact marketing, and there's a website with handbooks you can download. So if you want a guide, that's
It's called Doc Society.
Yeah, it's
The
very,
Impact
very
Field
helpful.
Guide from Doc Society.
Distribution. When you get your pitch together, and you've got some good short documents, and you've got a good log line and a synopsis, you can go to New Zealand distributors. They are open to meeting with you, but you need to be really prepared and ready. But that can be a way of helping you understand who your audience is. Do as much research as you can, and Steve talked about comps or comparable films, and he talked about that you need to make sure that they, worked. But there's levels of working as well. Sometimes they can be critically acclaimed, and sometimes they do box office, and looking at those variables. But they can help start the conversation about where you think that audience is and who you think will come to this film, and this, and they can also be models for you to understand that. But you can approach distributors and you can talk to them and get more information. It's a real research project, this thing.
Can I just say, I've just put up the panellists from our Doc Edge forum last year.
Yeah.
If you go through all these, you'll see there's 7 distributors through there. So you can, if you come to our forum, you can hang out with these guys, you can meet them, you can have a chat, meet them in person.
And they're lovely people.
Yeah, and they want to chat. They want to be approached.
Screen as well did a really great panel of distributors, and I think it's probably on their website. And that's really invaluable. And what was really heartening, oh, sorry, I tapped my microphone, was that they all talked about how much they love New Zealand films and the work that they put into New Zealand films. Like Mad Men's, they're distributing 5 New Zealand films this year. And so they do amazing work with New Zealand filmmakers. They're really passionate about it. And that was really heartening to hear, because you don't know, because, they have to sell stuff and they have to find an audience. So yeah, go and chat to them.
Chris?
I might sound really naive. What is the log line first? And you're talking about this film that's 5 years and counting, not made. How are you funding yourself? I'm sitting there going, and really perplexed by that. But I would like to hear.
Yeah. So first of all, logline. So for example, a logline is like the short pitch that summarizes possibly in a sentence or 2 sentences what the film is. So for example, our logline for our film is a filmmaker's journey to discover the part her father played in the tragic death of New Zealand toddler Iris Kathleen Davidson, who died of severe brain trauma in 2002. It's possibly an older one. We've got other ones, because you can tweak it as you go along.
Or like Slavko said, best intro for chickens.
Yes, comps and comparisons, comparing your film.
Yeah, I'd say that was a tagline too.
Yeah.
Steve can probably answer that question very accurately.
He's
Sure, well, you said what it is. It's the tiny bite-sized edible version that lets you know what's the story about.
And it does have the conflict in it. It's got the heart of the story. If it's a character, it's got the character or the important aspect of it. Baby Iris is mentioned in there, and a tragic death, so that actually tells people a lot of the story. And people are notoriously bad for writing log lines. It is the thing that is
really
shared
hard.
the most.
Yeah.
It's a thing that we put on when we're doing, when we've got applications coming in. If we have a spreadsheet, it's the log line that sits on the spreadsheet. So that's the thing that people, and that's the way people pitch to each other too. Film festivals, I know, they pitch the log lines to each other because they're competing within the film festival to get their favourite films in there. So it's a really important piece.
When we're selecting films for Doc Edge, we just look at the log line and the synopsis.
Yeah.
And you've got 2,500 films, and you just scroll through and read all the log lines.
Yeah, and if they and imagery, one image that is tonally, thematically representative and emotionally compelling, it needs to draw you in, But that is really important. What was the other question?
The 5 year,
Logline?
5 year
year.
time.
How are you eating?
Well,
she's got a day job.
I do have a day job. So so we both have day jobs, Tess and I. It's harder for Tess at this stage because she's really in the midst of writing drafts. I'm very fortunate, and I work very hard, I should say. So because I'm a producer at the Gibson Group, this film is also a Gibson Group film. So it is really hard. Like, you know, the funding that you get in development. We are lucky in New Zealand to get development funding from the Film Commission. Actually, there are a lot of countries that don't have any funding. It's really hard. So you need to also be an expert on grants, funding, all that sort of thing. So yes, we've got funding from Film Victoria, New Zealand Film Commission. We're about to look at what other grants we can get. There's US-based grants, European-based grants, open to New Zealanders too. Some of those are places like CineReach. They've flown out of my head now. International Documentary Association. There are a few of them.
Pacific Islanders Communication.
Yeah. A grant. You want a grant. So a grant means you don't have to pay back the money.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it used to be at the Film Commission, they've changed to having development money be a grant. It used to be tied to your production funding. So if you went into production, the budget had to pay that money back, so to speak. And everybody just went, let's just not make another barrier. And some genius, I don't know who it was, but decided that DDF would be a grant from here on in. And so thumbs up to that one. But it's just... You've got to have
a hobby.
Yeah, it kind of is a hobby.
Until it gets going.
But you know, Jane's working in the area of documentary and factual television, so that feeds the craft of making a film. But films, this is something we talked about. Films take an enormous amount of development. You just cannot get away from it. It's the most intensive development that I've ever done personally. I don't know if you feel that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got a question over here.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we can, as a storytelling and filmmaking community, respond to events in real time. I remember 9 years ago to this very minute, I was standing in Latimer Square, wondering if my kids were still alive. Now, my colleague Jared Smythe was able to pick up a broadcast quality camera and go for it. So if we find ourselves in a situation like that, and hopefully we won't, but if we do, and we begin shooting, as an industry, how do we respond to that and recognise it's got some validity and find funding to support that kind of thing? It's totally different to what we're talking about today, but it is documentary making in real time, and I just wondered about your thoughts on that.
Becomes your trailer to seek funding. It depends what the project is, whether it's a film or the two are quite similar these days, film or a television project. But it's still your pitch that you would use, and it would probably end up being in the final product, of course. But it would be your trailer or your part of your proposal that you have it.
Are you meaning, so I just need to clarify because I'm not quite sure if I understand. So are you meaning that, so for instance, you've used that example of an event, you know, a catastrophic event happening, someone being able to film it sort of pretty much in real time. And are you meaning like uploading it online or no?
No, I'm thinking
to apply for funding with it. So in terms of you shot the footage and then you have post-production funding, is that what you're meaning?
No, what I'm thinking is like everything we've talked about today is a pathway which maybe takes 2 to 5 years to come to fruition. I'm talking now about events happening in real time, which if you don't get them, you've lost it.
I think television responds to events in real time, and online platforms sing out if you think that if you disagree. But excuse me, film, you know, as a slower kind of
medium.
Yeah, and I'm just about to choke, so I'll just have a quick glass of water. What do you think? Because I think...
I mean, if it's a film project, even if you've got the footage in real time, you still have to sell that footage. Someone has to buy it and want to make the film.
That comes down to access, doesn't it? I mean, it's really, because you think about sometimes with catastrophic events, you know, then everybody descends into the environment and then everybody's making a documentary about it. So it's the point of difference, it's the access, it's things like that. I guess it just, there will be a time possibly when you can do something with a more expedient turnaround, but at the moment things are a little bit, they're not exactly analogue, but it's a bit slow. And it depends who you're trying to reach and what your outcome is that you're wanting, what kind of audience you want to reach. The model that we use, you know, at the Film Commission is a pretty old world model, you know, to be fair. And, you know, the streaming agencies and, I mean, there's a whole lot of disruption going on around, and there has been. I mean, even 30 years ago, there was constant conversation about television being disrupted, but it's even more so. Films being disrupted, the festival circuit, where money comes from, you know, all sorts of things are happening. You look at all the streaming platforms, you know, growing, the growth of that. You know, it's a difficult question. And obviously I haven't answered it very clearly.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just wondered how, if somebody's out there doing something and they haven't got funding in place, but it looks like they've got a good story to tell and they're getting good images, I'm just wondering...
It's difficult
how it's
because
received,
you can't. We don't do retrospective funding.
That's my point, I think.
Yeah, it is, and I mean, but you know, that's what I'm talking about. It's an old model. You can apply for. You still have to do a lot of speculative work. People do apply for, you know, post-production grants, finishing grants, but there are requirements, festival requirements, and they're New Zealand-based festival requirements. But I think you have to have 4 screens in 3 cities or something like that.
And you've got to have a rough cut.
Yeah, so you've got to get to rough cut stage. You don't have to have done a mix or a grade, but the shape of the story needs to be there. I don't think it even has to be a locked cut, does it? So that's as best I can answer that question at the moment, which is somewhat unsatisfactory. I'm sorry.
No, I'm happy. That's good.
Steve?
Just to add on to that, I think it is an access question. And if this were your 4th documentary that got distributed around the world, it's really easy to make 2 phone calls and be somewhere in a week.
Yeah.
But if it's your first and you don't have a track record, then yeah, it's going to take a long time to...
But like Jane said, like turn it into a trailer and submit it to pitching forums.
You know, or crowdfund to get an amount of money to get it through an edit. You know, I think you have to be resourceful, and I think though that it's been mentioned that like lots of countries don't have government funding to make material, and if you're in America, you know, you don't, but they have other means, and a lot of it is relationship based, and I just want to go back to that, particularly going into international forums, because it's so for Jane, the relationship she's building now, they are career builders as well, but those people connect other people, and you heard her say once you do one you go to the other, you see the same people, and they do, and they all talk to one another. So that's something it's kind of, if you looked at it in a pejorative term, lots of people would say it's not what you know, it's who you know, and I don't think that's a very useful frame. I think that and one of the things that Jane talked about is that it kind of doesn't matter who you are. If you've got a really good story and you persevere and you connect with those people, they will be interested and they'll want to know you. And I think that's a much better, optimistic way to approach it. And Slavko actually talking about, you know, that when you cross the ditch, everybody forgets. And I've lived in Invercargill, it gets worse further south, by the way. You're in good form, people. I went for a regional television station down there, so there were some interesting conversations. So, you know, you have to find the way, you have to find the resource. If you can't get through the front door, go to the back door. If you can't get through the back door, go to the side door. If you can't go through the side door, get through the window. You just don't give up. Yeah.
And people, you know, as Steve said, I think it was Steve, you have to go into this believing and knowing that you have something people want, and they do need you, and people want content out there in the TV world, in the film world. They want in the screen world,
especially when you binge watch, you know, 6 episodes in one night.
Yeah.
I come from a marketing advertising background. I'm
Yeah.
just getting my hair on my toe wet here. But I think having an understanding of creative strategy and marketing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
there's
a lot of
strength.
Like NGOs and charities are like, well, you know, so it's like, because in the end of the day, you got to sell this.
Yes.
Not selling yourself. But if you're into it, you're selling yourself, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So getting a grip to what makes people
you have
you thinking what your transferable skills are as well, you know, in your specific case, you know, your knowledge and transferring it, and it will be different, but it's also you've got to build different relationships. But I cannot stress how important relationships are. And again, in terms of the mental frame that you bring to how you approach broadcasters. You've met Steve. He's lovely. I'm all right.
Yeah.
I'm from the film commission. He's lovely. I'm all right. So, but you know, again, the film commission, because particularly with the film commission, lots of people have a particular thought about, you know, it's a closed shop. It's all these things. I would encourage you to let go of that kind of thinking. And I would encourage you to approach people as human beings and actually just share with them. This is why, you know, the internet has got some, when it's good, it's really good, because it's about people sharing with each other and being authentic and genuine. And yeah, sometimes people will not necessarily put their best foot forward, you know, when you actually do approach them for different reasons, but don't give up, just keep going. But have an open approach and build relationships and connect with them. And Slavko's great. We caught up yesterday and he talked about when he first started pitching to television, and he got, I want to call her Christina, but it's not, Denave. Yeah, Katerina. And I just went, oh, holy shit, you know, because she was, you know, formidable. Yeah. But he made her laugh, and she just kept saying, oh, come on back, you know, because she enjoyed the laughs probably. But he honed his pitching, but he also built relationships, and the same with Sue Woodfield. And, you know, and people will be doing that with Steve as well. They'll just be building the relationship. And that's what they do. That's my team, and the talent development team are conduits of relationships, and we can do introductions and connect.
So can Doc Edge.
That's right.
I'd also just like to quickly thank our supporters who have helped make today possible. So massive shout out to Bree at Screen Canterbury. Thank you, Bree. This is our first ever Doc Edge event in Christchurch, and like super happy to be here, and hopefully it's the first of many. Thank you to Sparta, who have supported us, the New Zealand Film Commission, thank you, Jude, New Zealand On Air, University of Auckland, and
Television New Zealand for allowing Steve to be here this weekend.
And also, like, just a special shout out to Richard here at the Broadcasting School. Thanks for hosting us, Richard. And thank you to all the students here at the Broadcasting School for all your help. It's been really great. And thank you all for coming. Thank you.
The roof eye.